evening and welcome to the January 4th School Board meeting. This meeting is now in session. We do not have our JROTC this evening. I would like to ask the gentleman from Troop 164 to please come forward and lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. Come on right up here to the front here. Yeah, it is actually. They figured it out. It's listed. There we go. Would everyone please rise?
Republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We're always happy to have scouts visiting us to learn a little bit about citizenship. And the members here this evening from Troop 164 tell me they are from HB Woodlawn, Gunston, and one other school, I think? TJ. Thank you very much, gentlemen. As you can see, Ms. Van Dorn is not able to be with us tonight. She is away for family matters. I would like to welcome several county board members who came to join us. Mr. John Weistat, Libby Garvey, and Eric Gutschall. Thank you very much for coming. And I think they are here because it is a special evening. We are welcoming our new board member, Monique O'Grady. We're very much looking forward to working with Ms. O'Grady. And would you like to make some comments?
Do I do this? Okay.
Yes.
Yes. I just want to thank you and all the members of the board, Dr. Murphy. I'm so excited to be here, everyone, and I want to thank the Arlington community for supporting me and allowing me to serve in this capacity for the next 4 years. I have never, ever seen the boardroom from this vantage point. I've seen it quite often from the podium over there. But I just want to thank you all. I look forward to serving you and working with you. I'm especially excited to work with the county board, my colleagues here at the dais, of course, Dr. Murphy, and so many members of the staff whom I've had the opportunity and pleasure to interact with, some for as long as 20 years. So thank you very much. Look forward to getting to know everyone at office hours and meetings, and thank you for this opportunity.
I would just like to say first on behalf of the full board, we're very happy to have you here and we welcome you. And Monique and I first met when we both served on the Early Childhood Advisory Committee. I was trying to think of the number of years, somewhere between 10 and 15 years ago. And so her joining the board really contributes to the legacy that we have as a school board, that we are generally longtime parents, committed citizens, committed school activists, people who have participated in a wide variety of ways. And I think this board really continues to have that personality, that we represent a wide range and swath of Arlington. In fact, a fun fact that I realized about this board is that we have, the five of us, have all sent our children to different middle schools. So by definition, we have that sort of full geographic diversity, as well as a lot of other different varied experiences. Lots of common sense, practical parenting experience and school parenting experience that I think is extremely valuable. Lots of things I could go on and on about how excellent this board is, but that's just a brief summary. Do you have family here that you'd like to introduce?
Thank you. My husband, Michael O'Grady, will celebrate 26 years this year. One of my daughters, Caitlin O'Grady, is here. She's a graduate of Washington Lee High School. Another daughter's not able to be here. She's working away, and I have a son, I think, who's at a piano lesson. Okay, thank you.
All right, and we are definitely used to people coming and going during our meetings, and want to let those who came out to support Monique know that At this point, we are going on to our school board business, so if you do choose to depart, we totally understand. But I do want to share, for those of you who are interested in some of the amazing things we're doing in our schools, the first item we have is a student showcase where we will be having students share some of their experiences at our option programs at the secondary level. So if you're interested in sticking around for a few more minutes, that will be something that I think you'll find very interesting. And I see that Mr. Goldstein has a comment? Yes, absolutely.
Little welcome comment to my my new colleague. So Monique and I were, I guess still are, community activists for, I think, pretty much going on 20 years, if not more. And I remember an early active conversation we had probably 20 years ago when I said to her, Monique, you really ought to run for the school board. And she said, no, I'm never going to do that. And, of course, it came up a few times since then, and so I'm happy that common sense has finally prevailed, and I'm delighted to be working with her now. Thank you.
Ms. Talento, would you like to say a few words?
I would. Good evening, everyone. I unfortunately do not have the pleasure of knowing Monique for so long. We met when I was campaigning for the school board, and I had heard amazing things about her and her activism and her passion for our school system. So I'm very, very excited to have you on our team, and I look forward to working with you and making great things happen for our schools. So welcome, and thank you, Monique.
All right. Thank you all so much. And we will go on then to our recognition for the evening, which is a showcase on option programs available to our secondary students. We have Mr. Tyrone Bird, Supervisor of Secondary Education, Mr. Chris Martini, Director of Career Technical and Adult Education, and they will introduce our presenters.
Good evening, everyone, and thank you so much for having us here. Congratulations, Ms. O'Grady, and we look forward to working with you in the Department of Teaching and Learning. So January 19th marks the end, the deadline for students to submit their applications to transfer to an option school here in Lawrenceburg, Virginia. So Dr. Nattrass thought it would be a good idea for us to share the great things that are going on in those schools with the greater community as they support their child and the choices that they have to make in the coming weeks and months. We have an embarrassment of riches when it comes to students. So for a student to be selected by a principal, we reached out to the principals and asked them to nominate a student to come and speak on behalf of their peers at their school. And we have 4 amazing students here this evening who are going to introduce each other as they come up and share their story. And then afterward, they'll be available for some questions and a cool picture. Okay? And we'll begin. I think Abby's first. Is that right? Here we go.
Hi, my name is Abby DeCall. I'm a 9th grader at Arlington Tech. And one of the things that really distinguishes Arlington Tech from other high school programs across the county is how student-driven the experiences are. We have so many opportunities to get involved with the curriculum of the program as well as the community of the school. For example, we have 2 leadership teams. We have the cultural leadership team, which focuses on planning events for our school, such as Spirit Week, and we also have the learning leadership team, which is actually the team that I'm on, and we are currently working very closely with administration to design our senior capstone project. And as far as experiences being student-driven, 2 more things fall along the same path, and those are the learning and the coursework, as they are also very student-driven. And at Arlington Tech, we like to work collaboratively with our teachers and clients to integrate and leverage the skill sets that we learn from both of our academic courses as well as technical courses. And I've never been to a school where I have so much say in what the work actually looks like and how the learning actually occurs. For example, in my math class, I was asked to design a project that showed my abundance of learning from our very recent absolute value equations unit, and I chose to design a logo, and this project meant that I would have to use my skill sets from both of my graphic design class as well as from my Algebra 2 class. And I first went to my graphics teacher to ask about the basic components of a logo, and then I went to my algebra teacher to learn about the equations behind the geometry, and I was able to manage the timeline, the entire project, the scope, and finally delivered a product that that was evidence of my learning from 2 of my classes. And a lot of the projects that we do at Arlington Tech are cross-curricular and also very relevant to our interest and our CTE classes. And Arlington Tech offers motivated students like myself an incredible opportunity to revolutionize and personalize the learning experience. And we develop our skills in collaboration and project management, and that really helps us master the curriculum that is needed for our individual classes. And I'm grateful that this program is an option for high school students like myself, and I encourage any student that wants to look into Arlington Tech to actually go ahead and further explore all that it offers. So that's my little tidbit on my experience at Arlington Tech as a high school student. So thank you to the school board and my school for this incredible opportunity. And I'd like to hang the mic over to Megumi from Wakefield.
Hi, my name is Megumi Thurston, and I'm a senior at Wakefield High School, and I'm going to be talking about the Spanish Immersion Program offered at Wakefield. So I started the Spanish Immersion Program in kindergarten, not knowing any Spanish, only speaking English and Japanese at home. I couldn't even roll my R's. But junior year, I took this highest level of Spanish offered in my high school, which is AP Spanish Literature, and I finished with an A. So that says a lot about the program. It takes students from not knowing anything to being able to excel in the upper AP level classes. I was also able to travel to Spain my sophomore year with my biology class. We talked to natives, we traveled, we went to museums, and it was really amazing experience to be able to use a language that I had no past experience in, like no family. I was never tutored, but through the Spanish Immersion Program, I was really able to connect with the people there and find a common ground. So yeah, I definitely encourage anyone who is considering going to Wakefield. It's a really good school. The teachers are really helpful, and even like me, if you don't know any Spanish, they'll really guide you by a step-by-step procedure. It's not like you suddenly go to a class and you don't know what you're doing. It's very gradual, so it's very manageable. And yeah, I hope you guys, if you're thinking about it, are able to go to Wakefield High School. Thank you. I'll now be introducing Jamie from HB.
Good evening. My name is Jamie Kang, and I'm a senior at HB Woodlawn. And I wanted to thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak to you tonight. I'm honored to represent my school, and I'm really excited to talk to you about the unique and wonderful place that has been my home away from home for the past 6+ years. So HB Woodlawn has had a really profound effect on my life. A central part of the HB mission is to teach students to be independent thinkers and learners. This is best illustrated in our motto, verbum sap sat, or a word to the wise is sufficient. Because of this philosophy, my educational foundation is one of exploration and academic curiosity. For example, HB students have the freedom to plan their own class schedule each year. This may seem simple, but I promise you it's much harder than it seems. This process has taught me to take ownership of my education, and the sense of ownership in combination with the close student-teacher relationships has made me feel like an equal partner in the education process, making me more motivated and excited to learn. Because of our emphasis on freedom, independence, and self-reliance, students learn to manage their time and are encouraged to take part in the activities that are most important to them. In my case, this is theater. In my time at HB, I have participated in over 10 theater productions. This is due to our strong arts department and the many incredible opportunities for student direction. The majority of our shows are directed and teched solely by students. So one of the most unique HB institutions are our weekly student-led town meetings. Students and teachers have equal voting power on school-wide decisions, which allows students to be directly involved in the school governing process. So whether it's through these town meetings or student-led organizations, student leadership and initiative are what HB is all about. Personally, I had the opportunity to lead 2 different programs throughout my time in HB, and this is Stratford Friends and DART. And I was even able to teach a class on feminism last year during Fab Fest, which is our 2-day period where students can create and teach their own shortened classes to their peers. And it's like on topics outside of most curriculums. So all of these unique experiences stem from the immense amount of trust given to students at HB and our really strong emphasis on collaboration. We are allowed the opportunity to explore and to make our own mistakes. And when these mistakes do happen, we know that we have a strong community of students, staff, and families behind us to help us learn from them. Thank you so much. Next, I'd like to introduce Alex from Washington Lee.
Hello, my name is Alex Pascasello. I'm a senior at Washington Lee High School. First off, thank you so much for allowing me the opportunity to speak here tonight. First off, Washington Lee High School is fantastic. I've had an absolutely amazing time my 4 years there. The people there are fantastic. The staff is absolutely wonderful. And Dr. Robertson, I think he's watching this right now. Hello. He's a fantastic principal and a great guy. But of course, I'm here to speak mostly about the IB program, which is unique to Washington Lee High School. So the International Baccalaureate Program, or the IB program, is a program that's offered at Washington Lee that is similar to AP classes, but instead it's more of a program. So whereas AP classes, you can take individual classes, IB programs, you can take a partial IB program and get a partial degree and take 3 classes a year, or you can do the full IB program and take 6 classes a year. And the full program includes the extended essay, which is a 4,000-word essay that you write during your senior year, a class that you have to take called Theory of Knowledge, which is kind of similar to philosophy, if you'd like to think about it like that. And the IB calls it Creativity, Activity, and Service, and we abbreviate it CAS. And you do participation in creative, active, and service programs for required hours of that. And then you also have a senior project that you finish at the end of senior year. So, of course, I chose IB because it was the next challenging level that I could pursue in my education. I started the IB program in sophomore year, which is a little irregular because I took IB pre-calculus. And I have to say, it was probably, I like math, but it was one of the most interesting math classes I've ever taken, especially because for most IB classes, you write a paper called an internal assessment. And I had never written a paper about math before. That was a very new thing to me. But I was allowed to write a paper on the orbits of planets around the sun, if they were circles, and how that would look with sine graphs and stuff like that. And I made an equation for all the planets on how you could calculate the orbit and stuff, which was really cool that I was able to integrate my experience with math with something that I really enjoyed about it. And you're in classes with people that are just as dedicated as you, who really want to pursue that next level of education like you. And the teachers are there to give you that next level of education and help you learn and strive in that class. So the IB program has been really incredible for me. And if anyone is thinking about doing it, I would definitely recommend it. It's a lot of fun. It's really cool. And it's an experience that I'll definitely remember for the rest of my life. Thank you so much. And if you have any questions, we are now open to answer them.
Thank you all so much for coming out. And I do want to note that you're here on a snow day. We really appreciate you coming out to share. Great presentations. Board colleagues, do you have questions or comments? Anyone? Okay, Mr. Goldstein?
I just wanted to say hello to my neighbor, Jamie. She probably doesn't even realize that we are neighbors. But and I saw her dad here, too.
Yeah, there he is.
Oh, there he is. Hi, Stan. So I'm delighted you guys could come from the snowbound Douglas Park.
Yes, absolutely. Shall we do a photo? All right. Come on up, guys.
Nicely done. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for coming.
Thank you.
Thank you. thanks so much. It was great, thanks.
Do a moment of silence.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. Very good. Yep. We'll see maybe you on Saturday, right? For Arlington Tech.
Oh,
We are now at announcements, but before our regular announcements, I have some sad news to share. 3 members of the APS family passed away over the last few weeks. They include Bella Romero Lopez, a student at Discovery, Mrs. Cassandra Merchant, who was our extended day supervisor at Hoffman Boston. Ms. Merchant came to APS in 1988 and has been at Hoffman Boston since 1997. Extended Day Director Bobby Kaplow shared some words about Ms. Merchant, and I'd like to read them to you. She was quirky, funny, and kind, and she cared, she cared, she cared. The other day we were talking with the Hoffman Boston staff, and someone mentioned the time that a staff person simply commented that she had a hole in her sock. The next day, Cassandra brought 10 pairs of new socks for anyone who needed them. A pretty typical Cassandra story. The staff described her as their mother. She tried to take care of everyone, staff, children, and families. She also wrote poetry and sometimes shared her work at the supervisor meetings. She will be missed. We also want to remember J.C. Perry, who was a longtime member of our staff, joining APS in 1999. Mr. Perry taught aviation and engineering at the Career Center. He also taught at the Governor's STEM Academy and at H.B. Woodlawn. He pioneered many courses in engineering education, architectural drawing, and aviation, and he was a strong supporter of STEM and CTE programs. A promoter of interdisciplinary teaching and STEM workforce development, Mr. Perry also was a leader in establishing dual enrollment initiatives with the Northern Virginia Community College. In addition to teaching, he volunteered at Manassas Airport, where he inspired many young Arlingtonians and others to pursue a pilot's license. He will be greatly missed. I'd like to please ask for a moment of silence. Thank you. We will now go on to our regular announcements. On Friday, January 12th, the board will have a committee of the whole meeting at 8:30 a.m. in room 101. Colleagues, do you have any announcements? Hearing none, Dr. Murphy, announcements? Thank you.
Yes. Good evening, and welcome, Ms. O'Grady. You're joining a wonderful team, and we're glad to have you aboard as a member. So looking forward to working with you. I'd just like to welcome everyone back. We kicked off our week on Tuesday, and we've had a little bit of an interruption, but hopefully we'll get back to a little bit of a normal schedule here very shortly as hopefully the temperatures, I know we're all looking for them to be rising shortly. Next week, we've got our CCPTA Reflections event on January the 9th, and that's going to be right next door here. That's our collaboration that we have with PTA, and I believe we've got over 1,000 students that we're going to be recognizing or that were part of the Reflections event. January 10th, we have an early release for our elementary folks. We're going to be celebrating on January 15th the birthday of Martin Luther King. On the previous night, the 14th at Wakefield, there's an event that you'll see a little bit where we have our literary and visual arts celebration for Martin Luther King. The quarter ends at the end of the month, and then we've got a grade prep day on the 26th. One of the messages also that I passed along to our principals when we came back on Tuesday was kind of to remind students that we are at the halfway mark between with the second grading period. So we need to make sure that students kind of get themselves reoriented. It is a little difficult, and that was one of the things I impressed upon our principals to share with kids, is to make sure that they have a plan in the event that some of our time gets a little bit interrupted like it was today. You can see the report card schedule here we have for secondary report cards, with those being released for the second quarter on February the 6th, as well as elementary coming a little bit of a week later. We talked a little bit about, kind of doing a little bit of self-reflection and evaluation where you are, not only in the second quarter academically, but where you are in relationship to the year, and making any course corrections. And then we are also beginning to, I know it's hard to believe, but begin to talk about course selection for next school year. So parents, you'll be seeing some of this information starting to come home as we begin to discuss that with school counselors and with students as they prepare for next school year and pulling all that information together. May need a little help from the booth advancing the slide. For some reason, it doesn't appear. All right, thank you. On Saturday, we've got an open house at Arlington Career Center. And I do want to make mention, and she was here, Margaret Chung, so thank you for coming out and supporting your student this evening with our student recognition. I do also want to make mention we've got several of our students this evening being recognized down at the Lincoln Theater as Posse Scholars, and actually Miss O'Grady's daughter was a Posse Scholar. We're going to be bringing those students back on January the 18th where they'll be recognized. So congratulations, Mr. Robertson, if you're listening, and to your students that are also being recognized this evening. But we encourage folks to come out to the Career Center for the open house on Saturday from 9 to 11. It is an open house. There's no formal event or activity, but it'll give you a chance to familiarize yourself with the program, also become a little bit more familiar with Arlington Tech. That was also shared here this evening. And then we just make mention of some application deadlines for Arlington Tech. I've really encouraged families of elementary students to come out to this event, as well as middle school and high school. But it's a good sort of entree to find out what's happening at the Career Center and begin to come familiar and comfortable with the things that go on there. And many of those things are very, very wonderful, and the staff does a nice job, as well as Ms. Chung. All right, if we can move the next slide. For some reason, this is not cooperating. I made mention also of the MLK presentation coming up on January the 14th. That's going to be at Wakefield. We'll be recognizing a number of our students there and also celebrating the wonderful work of Dr. Martin Luther King. That starts at 5 and it goes to 6:30 p.m. And then we'll be recognizing those students also on January the 18th as part of the school board recognition who were honored with their visual and literary art winners. All right, we'll move on. We've got Kindergarten Information Night coming up on Monday, January the 22nd. It's going to be right next door here from W&L. Parents are encouraged to come out and hear a little bit about our kindergarten program, as well as prepare for registration. And we also have all of our elementary principals and staff out, so you'll have an opportunity firsthand to kind of interact and hear a little bit about some of the various opportunities that we offer with our kindergarten programs. Please note there is a snow date, which is Monday, January the 29th. All right, if we could go to the next slide, please. All right, school options and transfers. Let me walk you through this here a bit. As you know, with the middle school boundary option, we said we would be coming back and talking a little bit about what our middle school transfer options would be. We're going to be pushing out a school talk on January the 8th. I believe that's Monday, and that'll be sent in the afternoon. That will talk about what the various middle school transfer options will be for next year. And we'll get into a little bit more detail about that later, so you can be looking for that. I'll jump to the bottom of the slide and to let you also know that we are going to extend the middle school transfer application process to January the 26th. Because we're coming to out with this now, we want to give families that may want to consider some of the options that are available some time to make some considerations. So that's about a week after the other application processes shut down. We also have application for secondary options due for HB Woodlawn, Arlington Tech, the Wakefield AP Capstone, and the WNL IB. You heard about those from the students, and I think they did an excellent job in representing those. Those applications for high school transfers are going to be due on January the 19th, as well as for students who want to transfer either to Wakefield or Yorktown, and there are openings there. So more information to come out on that, and as we promised, we were going to look at middle school transfers, and I want to thank staff for doing that, as we are going to have some opportunities for middle school students opening. All right, we'll move on to the next one. It's that time of year. We've seen a lot of flu activity, and want to just continue to encourage folks to take precautions, washing hands, covering up if you're going to be coughing. If you're sick, we encourage you to stay home. We know that everyone wants to continue on and participate, but it's actually, you probably get better quicker if you stay home, and that may be some advice that I want to heed as well. All right, thank you, Ms. Elliott. All right, that is working. And then finally, we did have some inclement weather that we had closed school for today. We've already pushed out an announcement about a 2-hour delay for tomorrow, but this kind of just gives you an outline. We try and get our messages out by 5 a.m. in the morning or earlier. If we're going to have to close earlier, we try and get families a message by 11 a.m. That way it gives folks, if they need to come home from work or make contingency plans for their students. And you can see where we post that information, and also that it's available on the hotline. One of the ideas that we also ask families to consider is they may want to do some contingency planning, and it looks like we are going to be experiencing some winter weather as we go through the month of January, February, and probably into March. So we encourage folks to have contingency plans either with their neighbors or relatives in the event that we do have to close early. But welcome back, everyone, and we'll get into a nice rhythm and a nice beat here as soon as the weather begins to cooperate a little bit with us.
Okay, I was waiting for the round of applause when you mentioned the 2-hour delay, but
No.
There it is. There's the round of applause. Maybe they didn't know they could applaud your presentation. Okay, we are now ready to act on our consent agenda. May I have a motion to adopt our consent agenda?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second?
All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion passes 4-0. I'd like to announce that as part of that consent agenda, the board appointed Kathy Genovi as principal of the new Montessori school that will be housed at the current Patrick Henry School site. Ms. Genovi, if you could stand. Ms. Genovi has been an educator for over 20 years. She has extensive training that includes 2 master's degrees, one in elementary education and one in Montessori education, an educational specialist degree, and she has national certification in Montessori education. Before coming to Arlington Public Schools, Ms. Genovi taught in Florida and in Frederick County, Maryland. She joined APS in 2012 as assistant principal at Drew Model School, and in 2015 was appointed principal at Drew. For the last 3 years, she has led both the model program and the Montessori program at Drew. Under her leadership, the achievement gap in reading for Drew students has been reduced significantly. She also piloted the Family and Community Engagement Initiative at Drew, resulting in a 96% increase in parent participation. We're excited to have Ms. Genovi to lead the charge as APS prepares to open the new Montessori school this coming July. Thank you very much, Ms. Genovi. We're looking forward to continuing to work with you. Also, as part of the consent agenda, we approved revisions to the board liaison assignments to our schools and our civic associations. This mostly reflects the addition of Ms. O'Grady's schools and civic associations, and a few minor adjustments with respect to that. Those liaison assignments will be posted on our school board website tomorrow morning. And finally, as part of consent, we received the family and community engagement and the ESOL HILT briefing reports. These reports come to us every other year so that we see each topic as a presentation every other year. So this way they come to us just with some updates with data and updates with activities. And then the following year we see the larger presentation on those topics. These are both, I want to point out, topics that are of great interest to the board, and we do follow them closely, family and community engagement as well as ESOL HILT, but we're happy to receive those reports. At this point, we will turn to citizen comment on non-agenda items. And Ms. Elliott, do we have speakers?
We do. We have 2 speakers tonight.
Okay. And I will first review the speaker guidelines, and then we'll call the speakers. The school board welcomes public comment. Generally, school board members do not respond to comments during the meetings. If they have not already signed up online, speakers must submit a speaker slip to the clerk before the agenda item they wish to speak on is called. Each speaker may speak for up to 2 minutes. There is a timer to help you keep track of your time, and speakers should conclude their remarks when the buzzer sounds. All comments should address a matter related to Arlington Public Schools. Speakers should be courteous and address their comments to the entire school board. Speakers are called in the order in which they sign up. If you have written comments, please give them to the clerk. We do ask the audience to refrain from applauding, as it does take time away from the next speakers, and instead of applauding, we like the knock, the silent knock, which is a very visible illustration of your support if you choose to do so. Ms. Elliott, would you like to call the speakers, please?
Our first speaker is Rob Crow.
Thank you. Hello, my name is Rob Crow. I'm from the Garden City, aka Yorktown neighborhood, and went to Nottingham Elementary, Barrett Elementary, Williamsburg Middle, and Yorktown High, and am currently a student at Allegheny College studying history and community and justice studies. I chose to speak today because I'm very concerned about how this new middle school boundary map will affect racial and economic diversity at Williamsburg. I want to preface by saying that I totally understand and respect that people don't want to be bused across the county or have their elementary school classes split up in multiple middle schools. But if we stick with the boundaries that were adopted last meeting, then it is absolutely essential to create some sort of program that will bring more diversity into Williamsburg. Middle school is a time where students start to develop their own opinions, and I can say personally that being around a diverse group of students during middle school made me more culturally aware. It influenced my tastes and interests, and without it, I don't think I would have developed as much of a concern for social justice. This plan makes Williamsburg the most homogeneous middle school within 40 miles of DC, and I don't think that the students at Williamsburg will be getting the same level of education as at the other middle schools in APS. And while it is true that the schools aren't the only place to teach diversity, they are the best place to teach diversity because they are where kids do most of their interacting. Now, to focus on just the economic diversity aspect, this plan reduces the percentage of low-income kids from 12% to 1%. I grew up in a single-parent home, and there were times where we struggled and I was on free and reduced lunch. But I lived where I did because my grandpa let us live at his house rent-free. It was comforting to have other kids around me who came from struggling families. These boundary revisions are especially cruel to that 1% of low-income kids that are left behind, and while they are not large in numbers, I ask that you consider them too. It would be irresponsible and unfair of the school board to not come up with some sort of program to address these demographic issues. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Michael Beer.
Good evening, school board and staff. I concur with the remarks of this young man. I hope you'll serve on a school board in a decade or two. Welcome aboard, Monique. We're delighted to have you, and I hope it's going to be a great year. And I just want to thank, I've just been in a grateful place tonight. I know the staff have been working really hard, and we heard about the death of APS folks, and we're standing in a building, and we're standing on the shoulders of many people before us. I'm coming here tonight to talk about, in 90 seconds, a vision to improve education, reduce vacancy rates, increase funding for the schools, and turn Arlington into a magnet for foreign businesses. The proposal is to have Arlington really be a place where international community, foreign businesses, and residents will really want to come and live. And that consists of some ideas such as turning all of our elementary schools into dual language immersion programs, all of them. We heard the woman from Wakefield here who's fluent in Spanish. My guess is that she's fluent in a language and that the other four are not. We should not be stunting 90% of the education of our students and just allowing some of the kids like my own who get fluent in a language because we only have a very small number of schools offering Spanish dual language immersion at the elementary level. Also calling on the county to, 2 nights ago at the CivFed meeting to introduce the metric system so we have a dual system of measurements and to beef up sister city programs so they can do things. I think we can do this without increased costs. It's going to improve the education of our students. And the current steering committee can't handle this idea. It's too big because it's more than a 5-year kind of introduction idea. It's going to take about 10 years to implement
Thank you, Mr.
this.
Beer. Thank you.
So please help push this idea forward. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay. We are now at our monitoring items. The first is the superintendent's update on the 2017-2018 action plan. Dr. Murphy.
All right. Thank you. I just want to give everyone kind of a little bit of an update as far as where we are with our schedule with the action plan. I do have a reminder slide at the very end about Engage, and Engage is probably the best resource for you to access with the calendar, with any adjustments with the schedule that we have, and then any information with upcoming meetings. So I just want to bring us up to speed with Group 1, some of the activities going on there with our new policies and policy revisions, specifically related to school facilities and naming policy criteria. We've had a slight adjustment here, and through the month of January now, a staff committee is going to begin its initial discussion based on some of the information and activities that have occurred prior to that. We also will be bringing back a draft criteria proposal developed and then finalized by the staff in February and Marchish, and then the idea is that in April the staff committee will bring the initial proposal here for the school board to review at a school board meeting. The work being done with also acceptable use. We've broken the acceptable use policies in 1-to-1 into 2 specific categories, one dealing with filtering and federal guidelines, the latter dealing with acceptable use. Where we are right now is that in December and January, we've been having activities with both the technology and the ACI advisory committees, and I believe earlier this week or last night, they had that discussion at ACI. The plan is here to bring it forward as an information item on January the 18th, and then for the school board to have action. And I did hear, by the way, with both of these committee groups, we've gotten some good input. With the second policy on acceptable use, we are going to be bringing those in February to the various advisory committees. It's slated to come here on March the 22nd to school board, and then for action on April the 5th. So they're kind of moving on parallel tracks, but to some extent on different timelines. I touched on this earlier with middle school boundaries, be sending out a school talk to grade 5 families about middle school transfer options. And then the deadline also for secondary options and high school options is the 19th. We've extended the one for middle school to January the 26th. And then in relationship to this second group of activities, we've got slated an elementary school boundary work session on January the 23rd. Moving on to Group 3 with operational planning. I'll be coming out with my proposed budget at the end of February. We've got the strategic plan committee still moving forward with its work. Their next committee meeting here is slated for January the 9th. We've also got some community input that we're going to be asking for regarding the mission, the vision, and the core values. And we'll be pushing out a message about that here in the next day or so. And then we've got our capital improvement planning process slated We've got action item on January the 18th for the school board to adopt the framework, and then we'll begin our work shortly after the school board budget is adopted on the CIP. And then the last piece with our capital initiatives, with the Reed Building, that the BLPC has already convened and beginning its work with the Career Center. We've kicked off the Career Center Working Group, and they're going to be meeting here a little bit later this month in January. And then in regards to the Ed Center and the instructional focus there, once the strategic plan has been sort of finalized, we're going to be getting a lot of input from that strategic plan as far as some of the instructional focus around some of the considerations we have with our facilities. I made mention of Engage, best place to stay tuned as we continue to provide updates there. And that gives you kind of an idea of some of the things that we've got slated here in the month of January and through the rest of the spring.
Excellent. Thank you. That is a dense, busy schedule of events and meetings. I hope folks noticed that.
There's a few
I know I did.
There's a few things going on.
Yes, indeed. Board colleagues, questions or comments? All good.
Yeah, I'll just say, please bear with us as we push the information out, with some of the timeliness of it, and we'll give ample enough time so we get input and make sure that people, if they want to take action, they'll have that time available.
And we do want to clarify, we will have a lot of questions and comments on all of those items as we see them and discuss them. This was kind of an overview of
Absolutely.
the timeline and schedule.
Yeah, this is just sort of a precursor, kind of forecasting what's coming.
Definitely. Thank you very much. Well, next, we are going to do an update on our School and Community Relations Department. Dr. Murphy, I'll let you get seated before you introduce this next item.
I see Ms. Erdis moving toward the podium. And so we have a series of different updates that each of our departments and offices provide. These are either on a schedule where we provide briefs, and Dr. Cannon also made note of that at the beginning of the meeting, or we have presentations. This year, we have a presentation from School and Community Relations, who has actually engaged in an pretty comprehensive evaluation. So those recommendations will be coming out from that, as well as some information. We recently had a review from a Baldridge visiting site team, and they also provided some information. You have some recommendations and also a timeline with some of the actions you're going to be taking. So, Ms. Erdis, I will turn it to you.
Great. Thank you, Dr. Murphy, and good evening, board members, and welcome, Ms. O'Grady. It's nice to work with you on a different way. Tonight, as Dr. Murphy said, I'm going to try to briefly summarize all of the communications. You have received in the Friday letter, I believe, in December, a copy of the evaluation as well as a memo from me sort of itemizing the recommendations. So I'd like to tonight just on a brief overview of what we learned and what we're doing. The first thing I thought I would share, just to put it in place, is I came to Arlington Public Schools in 2000, and in 2006 we did a communications audit with the National School Public Relations Association. They came and did a 2-day visit and an extensive report at that time. And it was sort of interesting when we started the evaluation for this time around that we looked at the audit and said, oh my goodness, we've implemented just about everything they told us and beyond that. But since then, the world of communications has changed so drastically. In fact, I feel like every day I'm learning something new or seeing something new. The idea of social media was not even on the horizon. And then with our growth and the challenge of communications of what we've needed to do here, we've had to change a lot. So we felt that it was a good time to look at what we're doing as we continue to grow to how we can reposition. So this year we set out, and as Dr. Murphy mentioned, we ended up actually having 2 reviews. One was through the Baldridge evaluation on organizational management. One major section of the Baldridge site visit and Baldridge evaluation is on communication and engagement. So that piece we looked at very carefully. The second was we contracted with an outside company, McGinn & Company, that's located here in Arlington, Virginia. And one of the reviewers was actually a former school board member from another state. So it was interesting, one of the reviewers actually had a good understanding of how school systems should work. They did materials review, they did interviews, I believe, with a number of the board members, as well as executive leadership team members, my staff. They conducted a number of focus groups in English, as well as Spanish-speaking focus groups. And then they looked at all of our communications, the website, the social media, the plans that we do, the publications that we make, and so forth. And from that, issued a final report. So in start, we looked at where we are staffing-wise, because communications has become so incredibly important to the organization's success. In 2000, when I arrived, we had 7, they're called E&P scale staff. Those are the exempt staff who work 12-month on communications. And then we had 2 G-scale, which are our office support staff. This year we have 7 E&P scale staff and only 1 G-scale staff, so we've actually shrunk our department some. Other changes is we picked up the print shop in 2003 because we worked so closely with them, and quite honestly because I had a strong background in printing before I came to Arlington Public Schools, and moved it from a offset printing process to a digital print shop. AETV joined our team because we worked so closely with them in 2011. And then in about 2000, I believe it was 2013-14, we started with our stipend program for liaisons to try to expand our reach without adding staff to the process. So that's where we are, but we're pretty much at the same staffing level that we have been for the last 17 years. You'll see a photo of the full team there. The newest member was the young man you saw come out to take your photograph. Rubaiyat joined us actually on Tuesday, was his first day. He's our new AETV member. And so he said, I'll take the photo, and he came out. So that was the group photo when we convened at the end of our staff meeting on Wednesday. But as the school board office staff will know, it's a pretty rowdy and rambunctious group, and when we meet, they generally end up closing the door so they don't have to listen to us. And so my team wanted to have what they felt was a better photo that exemplified who they really are. And so, oops, there they are. They felt that Ms. Erdis is the class teacher and they were the students, and you'll see some are rowdier or less attentive than others. But good time is had by all, and they are all really strong people. The other thing that's wonderful about them is they are all thrilled to be working in a school system because they really are committed and understand how this can help kids, which is interesting, to be working with people that in a non-classroom instructional position, but ways that they feel that they can contribute. So let's take a quick look at what we heard. The Baldrige report, we were very proud because when we looked at the overall evaluation from the Baldrige site team visit, the highest scores that Arlington Public Schools received were in the communications and voice of customer areas. So we feel like, okay, we're on the right track, but obviously we can always do better. They specifically cited us on the multiple ways that we have two-way communications with our families and community, our use of social media, and I know that many school systems around the country have actually looked how we've tried to leverage that and have copied us. APS School Talk and the use that we have had with that, Peach Jar, the targeted content and the way that we've developed Engage with APS on our website and utilize that as a central place for issues. They also cited that we have multiple strategies to communicate with multilingual students and families, although I know that this is something that all of us on ELT and in schools continue to struggle with. How could we do more on that? But they did recognize that there are a lot of efforts. In my office alone, we have the language line, we have Spanish-speaking staff, community engagement staff who reaches out regularly to the key leaders and so forth. So there's a lot going on, but we know that there could be more. The McGinn report also had a lot of very nice strengths that they cited. Obviously, the team of the talented and experienced communicators that we have put together in the department, which I mentioned earlier, and I'm very proud of. We have a strong framework of communications policies and procedures that we've put in place, and often I find myself sending to other school districts and other organizations copies of how we handle things, because we really have tried to be forward-thinking and say what works best. They noted that we have a reputation for being very responsive to requests for help from schools or the community, excellence in crisis communications or media coaching when a principal has something or a problem and they just need help on how to say it and how to handle it. Innovative liaison program we were cited for with our PR, web, and volunteer liaisons. High quality print materials, they noted a lot of that, and we're really pleased with that. Sarah Daniel in our office does more than half of our print publications, and she's really exceptionally talented. Recommendations from the Baldridge report was, the main thing that they recommended was developing a systematic and consolidated approach to receive, respond, and resolve customer questions and complaints, and finding ways to gauge satisfaction and dissatisfaction. And I'll talk about that in a little bit with some of our other responses, which were similar. The McGinn report, before they started their recommendations, they made 3 comments that they wanted to sort of frame the recommendations. They, first of all, said they had a number of small items, but larger items and more complex. They really wanted to stress that because the staff is really, they felt, working pretty much at full capacity, that larger items would either have to be contracted to outside services, or we'd need to look at adding staff and other resources to expand the work that we're doing. And then finally, recommendations needed to be considered in the context of the existing workload, budget, and priorities, so that if there were obviously things that they recommend that would cost and we said we don't have money, you know, that's a major factor in moving forward. So they had a group of, I believe it was 13 recommendations, and I'm going to very quickly go through. Fortunately, some of them, when we looked at them as a team, we said, oh, okay, we're already working that way. Because I think as we meet monthly and we handle our plan each year, we're looking at saying, how do we get better? How do we improve? So number 1 was to continue to refine the planning process. Some of you have, through the years, seen copies of what we call a mini communications plan. But I just wanted to sort of share, over the years, this is our communications plan. It's very extensively developed with the overview, with our annual plan, with our information for liaisons, and so forth, and our measurable targeted goals and so forth. So we have a lot of tools in place. We have an annual planning calendar that lists all of the events and so forth, and that is in there, and I'm happy to share it with you if you'd like to take a look at it. But we do have a lot of that already underway. And we look at it each year and say, how do we change it? What do we need to add to this to help? The second part is to improve communications around controversial issues. And I think some of that has been underway, especially with the action plan and the Engage work that we've been doing. One of the things they pointed out that we really need, and it's something that I've been saying for about the last 2 years, we need to find a way of developing a more systematized communications training plan for schools and school leaders, and really building that function. Many of our principals come out as educators, not as communicators. And yet they know that they spend the biggest part of their job and their day communicating with students and staff and families. So that is a key component that we need to really build that capacity, and hopefully through some sort of train the trainer program or whatever. bottom one, prioritize information so people can pay attention. One of the things that we did, and you've probably seen it with School Talk recently when we changed to the new system, is all of the Engage messages are coming out together, and there's a banner so it draws attention to people. That's what this message is about. All of the schools have their own banners now, so if you get a message from Yorktown or from Barrett or Barcroft, as a parent you recognize, oh, this is from the school. And it helps parents sort of sort through all of the information we're trying to share with them in a more organized way. And the addition of the images, we've had a lot of good feedback from people who say they're more visually appealing to them. So that is already done, and we will continue to look at modifications that we can make in the new system and add as needed. Their fourth recommendation was to communicate, and this one made me smile because we've talked about this one on and off for 17 years that I've been here, to develop a slogan that reflects the Arlington Public Schools. So our feeling is that this is really an ideal time to do it because the board is now working on a new strategic plan. So if we're going to do that, we should look at doing it, wrapping it around the new revised mission, vision, core values, and goals, and to develop a plan then for consistent use in the district and schools. So that is a future project, and it will need funding to move forward because it's going to need some outside assistance to do that. Not as much as I've spent when I've been at other organizations, but it will still require some funds. The fifth recommendation was to promote our department's role and resources better. They found that there were a lot of people that they know school and community relations, but they're not sure of all the things that we do. So one of the things we're working on, and I know that Dr. Natras had done it for the Department of Instruction, and we're in the process of developing a who to call list for the Department of School and Community Relations, because very often people call and they're not sure who in the department is handling it. And this would be something we would want to give to all of our staff and administrators, but also to be able to share with new hires and have it available on the website. We've also talked, and you've probably seen in Dr. Murphy's plans, a conversation to develop some sort of intranet site for staff so that we can have news and information and resources more centrally accessible. This is going to be a cross-departmental. It's not one department that creates the internet. It's really all departments. So we will be working on that in the coming year with Dr. Raj Ajasamili and I and a couple of my staff have already had one meeting about it, and we've started having conversations. Encouraging stakeholder input. I think we have done that well already. Now that we're moving into the second half of the year, we finished middle school boundaries in December. I know that you have a work session on elementary boundaries, and so we will be repackaging that Engage with the APS site to reflect the projects that are underway for the second half of the year. So that is something that will continue. Our hope would be that we'd have all of those updates done by around the 1st of February, once we know what direction we're going with some of the projects. And then asking for feedback from stakeholders. Some of this is underway already. In fact, one of the things we did, because we had heard that some people who put in comments on the Engage site didn't know what happened. So we have now implemented even an auto reply for that so that people who put a comment in get a reply, and the reply says how it'll be used, where it can be seen, and what the next steps are for those activities. One of the things we're looking at as a team is to put on the website 2 feedback links a year, one in the spring and then one around October, November, at the start of the school year, twice a year. There are a lot of, we have to coordinate the survey time with planning and evaluation because there are a lot of other feedback requests that happen through the year, so we need to make sure that we're not competing with others. And then the new community satisfaction survey, we have submitted a series of possible questions to add to next year so that we can get a feel, more of a feedback from the community on communications issues. The 8th recommendation is to expand outreach to non-English speaking families, and we talked about that. One of the things that we have been working on and are working on is to create an engagement 101 for families, specifically Spanish-speaking families, to teach them how to use, if they only have their cell phone, to use how to use the cell phone. If they don't have, for example, and we have a couple of schools that we're using as templates for that. Claremont has set up a training where they help parents, if they don't have an email account, set up an email for schools so that they can get all the schools' communications. And they show them how to follow their school or their students' class on social media, on Twitter, how to get into Facebook, or rather, how to get into the website on their phone, how to access PeachJar, and a lot of those things that some parents aren't quite so sure about. So that would be one aspect. The second thing, and you'll see because we've talked with staff in a number of departments that are funding translations to see if we can find a better way to coordinate translation support across the district. Number 9 is to involve staff earlier for frontline communication support. And I think we've done that to some extent, working with cross-departmental teams to develop either the intranet or engage activities that we're doing. The 10th recommendation is to help school liaisons be more efficient and effective. And that sort of points also to the training that we continue to try to do with them, keeping in mind that they have full-time jobs and this is an add-on. So we're trying, there's a balance, but we're looking at creating ways that the group can meet virtually. And we've also been focused more on highlighting best practices and sort of showcasing our stars among the groups. The 11th is to add, they recommended adding bilingual liaisons for non-English family outreach. And given the financial constraints with the budget this year, we just felt that this is not a viable option at this time to add more staff. So one of the things we're looking at is how can we strengthen the bilingual resource assistance and the ESOL HILT department's support and other resources already existing in the schools to help this without adding more staff. The 12th recommendation is to continue to refine and assess the communications tools, and I think this is almost something that we do constantly of, okay, if we're going to add something, is there something that we can delete? Although I normally find that finding things that you can cut is harder than when we add things. But we continue to look at ways, and one of the things we look at is a lot of data anymore. Fortunately, with social media, with school talk messages, we can really read what the open rate is and what the receipt rate is to figure out what really is working best for us. And then strengthening support for school board communications. Obviously, we're going to try to provide responses, resources, and support to the board as much as you need. And if we hear that there's something that's missing, we're happy to work with colleagues. I know, for example, Raj and his team will write something from Information Services, and then our job is to try to say, what does this mean? Because I don't speak technology like they do. So trying to put it in more logical or common language. The second thing is, and we did this about 1.5 years ago, and then it fell off with the deputy clerk attending our weekly editorial meetings, but we have asked her to rejoin us on our weekly editorial meetings so that she's aware of the hashtags and the messaging and other things that we are pushing out to all of the schools and the liaisons, and can hopefully incorporate that with the communications from the school board or in newsletters and other activities that you all are doing. So those are the recommendations, and at this point, obviously we have a lot to do. I think we've done a lot of good things. We have a lot still to do, and I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Excellent. Thank you very
Thanks.
much. Board colleagues, questions or comments? Ms. O'Grady.
Thank you, and I want to thank Ms. Urtis and her staff for all their hard work as a professional communicator. I personally know how hard it is to communicate, and I do appreciate you evolving and always looking at ways to utilize newer forms of communication to reach our community. I would note that the Periscope has been one way that we've seen that happen. So I want to thank you for that and your team, some of whom I've worked with over the years. I do have a question about Peach Jar. As a parent who spent in the past a lot of time designing, copying flyers, counting them out to go into mailboxes for each of the teachers, I was excited to see that we were moving towards a more environmentally friendly way to get information to our community members. But I wanted to ask you about that. I did notice that that was a strength that was noted in one of the evaluations that you had. But I really wanted to find out from you, is Peach Jar effective? Because I've heard from different parents, it may not be, maybe they're not as connected to it as maybe they were when they were receiving paper, and also whether or not some parents who maybe have are accessing it on their cell phones, who have limited data plans, are afraid to open it and wait for the flyers to load. So I wanted to get some information on that.
Okay. Regarding the use, after we did the pilot, we did a pilot with actually about 7 or 8 schools to test it, and we did a survey after it. And it was interesting because we had a lot of comments from parents saying, I'm suddenly seeing flyers and I don't ever remember seeing flyers before. So that was, that was one comment and I think it became a case of, for some students it got lost or fell out. I know, having been a former middle school teacher, that middle school students sometimes don't think it's cool to take those flyers home, and so they just sort of disappeared. And the other thing is, because of our policy, we couldn't do high school flyers. And now with this we can, to some degree. So, because we always knew that high school students just wouldn't take them home, period. Principals used to complain about that. So I think we have seen an increase. As for the data plan issue, I think some of this is helping to train people, because there are other options than opening the email on your phone. All of the flyers are also posted on every school's website. And there's a Peach Jar logo on each website. So you don't have to do it on the phone, even though you may notice the email comes to your phone. You can open them, and we actually advise, if people have data concerns, open it when you're on a Wi-Fi network, either your home, your work, go to the public library, go to the rec centers. I have family members that are always looking for free Wi-Fi at McDonald's, at Starbucks, at pretty much every restaurant. I went into the hospital with my sister a week or two ago. They have it. There are very few places that I don't go in that I pull up and there's a guest. So we encourage people to make sure you get on a network, because that will reduce the data costs. But if you can also, if you have access to your computer, and if you don't have a computer at home, most of our students have iPads or devices, and the parents can also go onto the internet with their child's iPad or device and look at the website from using those resources. So there are a lot of information or options for parents to access them. We just have to do a better job, I think, of explaining to parents that there's not just one way to look at them.
Thank you very much, and I was happy to hear that at Claremont they're offering opportunities for people to learn how to better utilize and access the system. Thank you.
Sure. Ms. Talento.
Thank you, Ms. Curtis, for the presentation. I greatly appreciate it. I have 3 things. The first is a comment on the intranet that we're working for our staff, and I'm wondering if there's been discussion about a visual directory to be included in that, and if not, I'd like for that to be considered. When I started as a new school board member, it was very difficult I knew so many names, but I couldn't connect the faces to the names, and I was asking if we had one, but I think that would be helpful, especially as we're growing and bringing on online new schools. we'll have a lot of new staff.
I think it probably would take time, but there are definitely easy ways to connect staff lists with, Human Resources is already doing the name badge photos, that if we can
yes.
find a way of marrying those
Yes.
so that staff, when they go, because I do the same thing, I sort of say, oh, that's what he looks like, so I know what the person, when I have people coming into my office, I often Google them to find out what the person looks like before they walk in, or who I'm looking for. So yes, I think that is definitely something we would love to be able to do.
And I know that this takes time to develop,
Yeah.
so I thought it'd be a good opportunity just to bring that up
Right.
and put it on your things to explore
Absolutely.
list. And then I saw on the presentation, I don't remember the specific slide, but staff voicemail was under the recommendations. Could you tell me a little bit more about what exactly they were discussing under that?
I think we heard some things about staff getting long voicemail messages, so I think what we need to do is tighten these up when we do voicemail messages. I just did one about 2 hours ago about having a 2-hour delay. I don't think anybody minded if it was a little long. But for some things, when you're really busy, if somebody wants to send you a reminder, we just have to learn how to be very resourceful and limit the amount of time. The comments were, I think, more on the length of voicemails rather than the amount.
Okay, and I bring that up because it's something that I also have to work with. And one of the features that I find would be helpful to me is if we knew the length of the voicemail we're about to listen to.
Right.
So if I knew we're a 15-minute voicemail or a 20-minute voicemail or a 5-minute voicemail, it would help me triage and manage that time. So I didn't know to the extent of what they mentioned that in there, and if that was also an opportunity as we look or explore that recommendation, if there's something that IT can do to say, this voicemail is from so-and-so, it's 20 minutes. And then I know that if I have that 5-minute trajectory time from one meeting to another, that's not a voicemail.
That's not one you're going to listen to.
I can skip over that one. So that's why I mentioned that. Okay. And then my final thing, and thank you, colleagues, for bearing with me. I thought I saw Mr. Belavia, I hope I pronounced his last name correctly, put out information on a texting app. Does that sound?
On texting, yes.
Yes.
We send out a message. We've sent out 2 messages, and we basically said we're going to send out another one. I think this morning's, last night's snow caught us off guard. But with the new school talk system, there's a way that you have to go in and make sure that you say, yes, I want to get a text message for emergencies.
Okay.
So we plan on continuing to remind families about that. But we also posted, coming back to Peach Jar, on every school's, there's a Peach Jar flyer that's posted that says, here's how you can make sure that your cell phone is in the system so you'll get an emergency announcement or text.
But this is for an emergency announcement. It's not for, because I know a lot of the immigrant communities that I work with, their main resource is texting. So we share a lot of the information via text and flyers and so forth. I just didn't know if that had something that had come up or if we have something in the system. So when I saw that, I wasn't sure if we were moving in that direction or if that's something that was brought up in the communications report.
Most of our texts have been for emergency communications. It would really require revamping how we write because text normally is a much shorter message than we sometimes can do.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay.
All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I was reflecting back on when you've come before us before, and I feel like in the past there's been a little more of like, well, we need to change our homepage on our website, and we didn't get photos up quickly enough. And there's so much, like when you had the statement about the drastic changes in communication, that just in real time, even as I've been on the board, you've been adapting to how fast things move. And I don't think anyone feels like homepages aren't updated and things like that. I mean, you're just clicking along in so many ways. I mean, it's really impressive, and I was really surprised to see that your staff is the same size. Because you guys are doing so much. And there's a lot of things that you didn't even mention. One of the main ones are the ambassadors in our schools, the parents who are also they develop an expertise in the boundaries and things and share that. You
Right.
manage those, I
Yeah,
think, too, right?
Well, we worked with Kathy Minberg in planning and evaluation. She's doing a lot of the direct communications weekly with them now. But, when we started out and we didn't have a Kathy Minberg, we worked to recruit them and put them in place. And I think we wrote the first month or two's worth of updates to them and really sort of established that system. But I think it's turned out well. And one of the things I was talking with Kathy right before the winter break was, because we're sort of at that mid-year point, is to find a way that we could maybe bring all of the ambassadors together and find out from them what's working and what's not, so that we can improve it since it's so new.
I know where you learned that idea.
Yeah.
do the evaluation and look for improvement. But the one thing I did want to ask you about, because it does seem like you're managing so many things at all sorts of levels and getting information out in a lot of ways, which is really great. But you did mention that you don't think we can afford the bilingual. I forget what the specific
They
issue was.
basically would say a bilingual liaison.
Liaisons.
Right.
But given that you work with all these different folks in different ways, I mean, we do have FACE going on that's doing a lot of engagement at the school level. We have bilingual resource assistants. What are they called? And so it seems like we have a lot of resources there. I wonder if there's a way to
Right,
connect
and that is
and
what
do
my
some things
response was,
with no
that we
budget.
just didn't feel it was financially doable at this point, but one of the things we want to look at is working with the Esau Hill staff and the bilingual resource assistants meet monthly, going into those. But the challenge is that the bilingual resource assistants really are supporting a specific class or teacher. So this, they really work outside of that role. And so finding that happy medium that they can help, and they have actually helped on some of the things. We worked with them when, for example, when we hosted the Engage Saturday, we sent a lot of messages to them to make sure that families knew about that event. And we do tap into them frequently. Our goal is to see how we could possibly further utilize their support.
Yeah, I think that would be great. And we want to be cautious. There's also, people feel like we ask them to do too much, but yet we want to take advantage of our best resources as well. So it's a balance, but this is really great. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And boy, you guys have earned your badge out there. You guys, we're going to hand it to you on the way out. Thank
Good.
you.
Thank you.
And we will move on to our final monitoring item, which is an annual update on social studies. Dr. Murphy.
Yes, and this parallels the report that Ms. Erdis just gave. However, the topic is going to be social studies. So I want to turn to Dr. Natras to introduce this. And by the way, this is a very good report, and I look forward to hearing from Kathy Hicks.
Good evening. Welcome, Ms. O'Grady. So I just want to take a very brief opportunity to introduce Kathy Hicks, who is going to be sharing a lot of updates on our social studies program, and I think she has quite a bit of interesting data and some of the updates and action steps and things that we are working on. So I'm going to just turn things over to Ms. Hicks.
Thank you. Am I pushing? Am I doing it? Okay, good. All right, so I have, I thank you, board members, Dr. Murphy. Welcome, Ms. O'Grady, this year to our board, and I'm happy to come before you this evening. Last year I did a briefing report, so now I'm back in front of you and having an opportunity to update you on where we've gone since we had our program evaluation a couple of years ago. And so go ahead, and I'm going to advance. When you get old, you have to look, you have to do your glasses on and off. I'm sorry. So this is our purpose in social studies, and this viewpoint really aligns very much with our goal of personalized learning that has been a really big emphasis. I also want to say, my teachers will tell you that I often say to them, our responsibility as teachers are to teach the children that sit in front of us, and that is what this is all about. It's having culturally responsive pedagogy that really is tailored to the needs of the students. And as I often say, these students are very different than what they looked like maybe 10 years ago and what they bring to the table, and so we want to really make sure that we're responsive to the student needs. The C3 framework is a national framework for the development in states, the development of social studies programs, and we use that framework. And as you can see, these are the focus areas that we use in our discipline and in our work in our designing of our curriculum and also in our professional learning, and these have been incorporated in the new professional learning framework that we have been developing in the Department of Teaching and Learning. Here is the overview of our courses, our SOL Pass Proficient and Pass Advanced rates for our end of course tests, our primary courses. You can see that we're maintaining high school scores, and we are also improving in our advanced pass in these scores. I do want to say that we have taken a look and taken a dive at where we're still wanting to improve, because even though they are high school scores, we do know that there are some students that we still need to support. And I took a deep dive and shared with my teachers the performance by questions, which really lets you know where our areas of challenge are. And one of the things that was consistently across subject areas is a better understanding of government, levels of government, the government and the economy, and how government works. And so what we have done is these have been discussions within our departments. We have also had some lessons developed, and this has been a great opportunity, along with the Local History Initiative, to pair with some partner organizations. For example, last year we had lawyers come in from the county and work with our classroom teachers and talk to the students about how the judicial system works. And we have had a reach out from the court system and had some students take some tours of the courts. And so it's really trying to partner to help our students develop a better awareness of our government systems. This next slide takes an elementary, middle, and high school 3-year progression to show that there's been a steady change. I do want to make a note on that civics and econ. We just started having that test 2 years ago, and I do want to make a note that we have a unique civics and econ in many other counties across the state. It's a standalone course, and we made the decision in Arlington to teach it as an integrated course, so our students study history, part 1 and part 2, through the lens of civics and econ, which I believe makes it a much richer and rigorous course. So they do take the civics and econ test at the end of 7th grade, but they cover that content in both 6th grade and 7th grade. By doing that, it allows our students to take a high school credit course in 8th grade. That is the next slide that I'm going to show you, which is world geography. So world geography is a high school credit course that all our 8th graders take. We have a very high success rate. We have really done a lot of work in trying to provide support for this particular course. We have developed some very differentiated resources. We work with our Hilton Special Ed teachers to have them develop and share their resources. And then you notice that in high school, it is taken by a very small number of students, predominantly students that are brand new to APS, but also students that have English language challenges. And so that is why that's an area that we continue to work on. This has been an improvement, and we are continuing with our high school teachers to share some of the resources that we're using to elevate those rates in the middle schools. We have also really encouraged enrollment in advanced placement courses. We have a lot of social studies advanced placement courses, and even as Arlington continues to rise in enrollment, the students that enroll in social studies courses also continues to rise. And one of the things that we've really done to encourage our students in high school is we've focused on rigor in the middle school and having students do primary source analysis and performance assessments in preparation for them to be able to take rigorous courses in high school. We also added AP Human Geography 2 years ago as a way that we can leverage students taking world geography in 8th grade and then being able to take an AP course that really dives in deeper in that particular content area. So this is a different kind of chart. On the left-hand side, what you're seeing is percentage of pass rate on the WISE test for financial literacy, and then the right side shows the rising enrollment. The WISE test has been a great addition to social studies. If you see that originally it was only taken by students in business, it provides students with a career and technical education certification, which is a requirement for a standard diploma. And several years ago, I developed what I call the trifecta course, because students that take economics and personal finance, they have it in an online format, so they satisfy that graduation requirement. They take the WISE test for financial literacy, which is another graduation requirement for a standard diploma, and then economics and personal finance is also required. And so you can see that we started with a very small amount of students that took it, and then we made it a requirement for economic and personal finance teachers to include that. The first year out, we had it testing in the spring. It was at the time where students were also taking SOLs, and we had some students opt out because they were just overwhelmed with all of them. So we realigned our curriculum. We moved the test to the first semester and realigned our curriculum, and that's when we take it. And then this last little set of results, we've aligned our curriculum, but last year they threw a little bit of a wrench and they made it a timed test. Right before the end testing, and so we are now working to continue to elevate those scores. But we've had a great growth in students earning this career and technical certification. So our our work has focused on our recommendations from our program evaluation that was done several years ago. So this first recommendation has to do with supporting the implementation of differentiation strategies, and that has been a really strong focus. And I'm not going to go through everything that we've done, but I do want to highlight one of our big goals is that we wanted to provide opportunities for our HILT students to graduate, to have graduation credits for courses they were taking. So over the past 2 years, we developed the U.S. Virginia government course specifically designed with the literacy scaffolding that will help HILT students take that course. And then this year, we worked this summer to design the one for economics and personal finance. So we shored up the literacy, we bought some materials to support, we really focused heavily on vocabulary. I met with Alexandria, who had already offered that course, really heard some wisdom from them, and we are successfully implementing those courses. We also recognize that our special ed students sometimes struggle with some of these high school credit courses, and we also developed a Part 1 and Part 2 for the U.S. Virginia course in history. It's a very difficult course, and that was a way to support our special ed students in that particular course. As we move forward, we want to make sure that these differentiated resources are showing up in our curriculum redesign. We're going to be fortunate this year. We are going to fully implement the 2015 social studies standards, and this summer we're going to sit down and rewrite our curriculum and incorporate some of these differentiated resources in that curriculum redesign. The next recommendation has to do with the increase in the level of rigor in social studies courses. We have focused really heavily on middle school and making sure that our middle school students have access to very rigorous instruction. We have reached out to the DBQ project, and they came and did an initial training. We have a coach in the county, and the DBQ project really helps students analyze primary sources and have debates about those primary sources and write about them, and it's great preparation for movement into AP courses. We also have expanded our performance assessments, and we even have teachers now that are developing their own performance assessments and then vetting them through our office so that we can share those countywide. We want to make sure that all of these resources are going to be available also in our curriculum redesign this summer. And at the high school level, that was our middle school focus. At the high school level, we've tried to provide a lot of flexibility. We have 3 virtual courses. They are self-paced courses that students can take for a full year during the summer and also in a semester. So that allows some flexibility for students that can advance to a course at a self-pace. Our last recommendation has to do with the integration of technology. We were fortunate this past summer to purchase some digital resources. We also hired some teachers to really invest in open educational resources, and they created a curated content collection for grades 6 and 7 of great resources, and we've been able to use that and implement. You have heard about, because I've come before you before to share, we partnered with George Mason, and we have implemented Through the Doors of Stratford, which takes Arlington's history of desegregation and use it as a centerpiece to show civil rights throughout the nation. And so that has been something that we've done. And we want to continue to develop these resources and put them in the curriculum design so they become a daily part of what teachers are using. And at this time, I will be happy to take questions.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Great work. Board colleagues, questions or comments? Ms. Talento.
Thank you for the presentation. I really appreciate it. I noted that in our high school program of studies, we are launching a pilot for African American studies at Wakefield.
Yes.
And we, in the recent years, have been looking on how to increase diverse and culturally appropriate curriculum that's reflective of all of our students. And so I was curious in any of the recommendations or future steps, because I know this doesn't encompass everything,
right,
or else we'd probably do that all night, just on social studies. I was curious if you had any more information on that. I know that these programs don't happen overnight, and I'm very excited about the program at Wakefield, and I'm hoping that it will grow in future years to all of our high schools. But do we have anything else in that?
Yeah, that's a great question. You have not heard yet from the Social Studies Advisory Committee, but one of their goals, or what they're requesting, is that we really focus on the global nature of our community, and that our curriculum and our resources are aligned along that global community. Really, the idea of culturally responsive practice, the expectation is it's integrated into all the courses. I was very pleased with the state realignment, or the resubmission of the 2015 standards. Definitely had a much more global focus. And if you're going to do it in any discipline, social studies is a place to do it. We actually have done quite a bit. We have, this past summer, we developed diversity lessons for K-3 of trade books that really focused on diversity, so that students could look at learning about same and different, and learn about, looking at the people that they learn beside, and understanding diversity. We, excuse me, we have developed the lessons, We Are All Arlington. Last year we had the big kickoff event, and we followed that up by developing lessons called We Are All Arlington for elementary, middle, and high school that really allows students to focus on the diversity. There is banners that were developed at the We Are All Arlington, and right now they're circulating through the county, and we have a teacher's guide that goes along with them so that students are examining and seeing their place. So those are some of the things, some of the highlights of what we are done. It's a big commitment, and as I said at the beginning about, you want to teach the kids in front of you, we live in a very, very rich, diverse county, and we would be very smart to leverage and to use that diversity and really think about teaching to the strengths of the students and how they can bring their story, all students can bring their story to improve the quality of our social studies. And the state standards support that, and that is really the expectation.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate that.
Okay, Mr. Goldstein.
Thank you. Thank you, Kathy. It was a good presentation.
Thanks.
I just have two just clarifications I wanted to
Okay.
go through. So can you go to slide 4, please?
Oh, okay, sorry. Thank you.
Thanks. So I was kind of struck by the size of the advanced pass rate on the, I can't read it from here, Virginia Studies on the far left
Yes.
over here. And I was also a little confused about the title, grade 4 through end of course. Is this a grade 4 class, Virginia Studies?
Yes, Virginia Studies is our grade 4 test. And then we have civics and econ is our grade, they take it in grade 7, and then the other ones are end of course tests.
Geography in grade 8 mostly?
Geography is a grade 8 course predominantly, yes.
Okay, and then world history 2 in?
World History 2 is our 9th grade course.
Okay, and then U.S. Virginia history is what?
11th grade.
11th, yeah.
Right.
Okay, so how do you describe this? How do you explain this, that you have more than half of the students getting an advanced pass in that course? I mean, is that because they live in Virginia, you know, studying the Virginia history, as compared to, you know, the pass rates we see in the other?
I will tell you that I would like to, a couple of years ago, we really did a strong focus on content academies. We know that our elementary teachers are generalists, and so we wanted to make sure that they were effectively having content support. And so I was a specialist at the time, and that was a major focus. And what we did is we took we asked our teachers, like, what are your areas that you are struggling with? And we developed lessons for those units, and we ran content academies where we brought teachers in, we made them available to teachers, and so that has really improved so that they have these really content-rich activities and resources. The other thing that we have done is we are strong proponents of History Alive, which is engaging strategies, and we have made a very deliberate intent to make sure that all our grade 4 teachers have History Alive training so that they actually have strong pedagogy to have students engage, debate, and so that it's a very rich and rigorous, and I think that really, those two factors really attribute to the success at that level.
Okay, thank you. Can you go to, I think it's slide 10? Now, you know, there's legions of people who are watching this.
Legions? Okay.
Everybody swears to me that they,
Okay.
Thursday nights, all they do is watch school board meetings on
Okay.
streaming, with their bunny slippers on. So I just wanted to make sure they know what DBQ stands for.
Sure. DBQ stands for Document-Based Questions. And so what a DBQ is, it would give a challenge. For example, I had students in sixth grade that just finished a DBQ on should soldiers have stayed at Valley Forge or depart. And so what the students do is they have primary sources related to the Revolutionary War, and they engage in those and analyze them. And then they have a classroom debate called a Thrash It Out, where they take sides on whether they should have just given it up and just left the Revolutionary War, and then students go to write an essay, and they have to take a position on were they really smart to hang with the Revolutionary War, or should they have departed at the Valley Forge? And that's what the DBQ project is.
Gotcha. Thank you so much.
Absolutely.
Ms. O'Grady.
Thank you, Ms. Hicks. You make history sound so fun.
It is fun.
Yes, and I agree with you. So I want to thank you for that and your hard work. You can tell that the students are very engaged. If you take a look at slide 6, though, I have a 2-part question.
Sure.
Thank you so much. So I loved world geography. Not that I remember taking it myself, but when I went to back to school night, my kids had the opportunity to or learn about it through the teacher. So I'm so impressed that we have so many students who are passing a high school credit-bearing course at 8th grade.
Right.
But I do notice that there is a percentage that's not passing,
Right.
and that concerns me. And it's also odd to me that when students who are in high school actually take the high school credit-bearing course, they're performing at a less successful rate. So I don't know if you could tell us a little bit about the students, and you did mention it a little bit in your presentation, but I'm just worried about the achievement gap, and I want to make sure that we are addressing that for other kids.
Perfect. Yes. So definitely, we still struggle with students that have students with disabilities and students that have some language issues, and they are the challenge, and they continue to be the gap. However, that being said, we have made some improvements, especially with students that are LEP, limited English proficient students, and we have really worked to, like I said, we had a teacher 2 years ago that we basically hired to develop very specific English language resources for geography. We've also tried to emphasize, one of the things about geography, it's a very skill-based course, and we've really developed some resources around analyzing graphs and charts because that's a lot of what world geography is about. So we have those resources, and we're working to support that at the middle school. And we have had some variation in how it's delivered at high school, and particularly at one school where they have used a lot of the middle school resources, they've seen gains in their high school. And so we're trying to make sure that it is more across the county and that we're reaching out. Some of those scores, it's a very small number, but those are our most challenged students that are often taking that course in high school. And what we want to make sure is that they are getting access to those resources and providing the training. We also have, just last year, put the geography DBQ into World Geography, and one of the things about that is the differentiated resource, so there are 2 levels, so it can be used with multiple groups, and so we're hoping that those focuses that we have will improve those scores.
Thank you so much, and I just wanted to also thank Ms. Talento for her very thoughtful question, because I would agree that diversity is an excellent strength and one that can be well explored in the social studies curriculum, so I want to thank you for that.
All right. Thanks, everyone. And while we have this particular slide up, I want to praise you for including the N, the population, the number. So by the way, is that 87 students who took the test, of which
Yes.
68% passed? So that really
Correct.
means, sometimes when we do percentages, it looks worse than if you just say the number of students. So it's literally, I think,
Right. It's a very
approximately
small-
27
it's a very
students.
small amount, right.
So that's kind of interesting. I've always enjoyed your presentations and the things you have going on. I'm really glad that you did get a chance to mention History Alive. I think that may be one of the longer-term initiatives we've had of some of the things you've mentioned, and that's just been so successful. Really, really, like we've been saying, making this so engaging, and so many of the activities you're doing are making social studies and these topics really engaging to students. The local history was something that the board asked for, and you came back the next year and had a plan and made things happen, and the Stratford integration thing has been amazing. There's really, really wonderful work, which of course simply means I'm just going to ask how much more of it we can do, because it's always so exciting. And actually, my 2 questions might actually be for Dr. Nattrass and Dr. Murphy more than Ms. Hicks, but we'll see. The first one is going to be about middle school courses, and in your activities and recommendations, you talked about more rigor, you talked about differentiation, which, as Dr. Nattrass knows, that is something we are talking a lot about, and hearing from parents, especially in middle school, that they want to see all students being challenged. And so I suspect you're doing a great job with what you have going, and I'm curious, maybe from Dr. Nattrass or Dr. Murphy, if you
No,
let me just,
I
if
can
you
tell you a
see this,
little, yeah.
okay, I just wonder if you
Maybe
see
it's
this as
a
an avenue, as we look for these kinds of challenging classes. Is this the area that we should be talking about?
So I can talk
Yeah,
a little bit about,
sure.
We basically, we did start the DBQ project a couple years ago, but they didn't have geography, for example. And so we just got geography. This is the first year that we're using it. We also have expanded because the state allowed us to have an alternate assessment. We've expanded the use of performance assessments. And it used to be, you had them, maybe would you use them? But now we can require it as part of alternate assessments. And so if you're using primary source analysis as your alternate assessment, I believe assessment informs instruction. And so the instruction changes to prepare students for that. And so that's one way, and I'm sure you could add on to that. But
Actually, now that you mentioned that, could I ask, is that one of the ways that we're replacing SOLs? Is that what you mean by alternative assessment?
we, when the state replaced the 6 US1 and US2, we had been developing about 7 years, we had been developing assessments, and that became our alternate. The students take a alternate assessment for every reporting category, and they verify that they and do those. And so those are very rigorous, and once again, that drives the instruction. If you're going to prepare kids for primary source analysis and stuff, it's going to improve your instruction because you're going to teach that way, and it's going to make your instruction more rigorous.
So I know that Dr. Natras is probably going to jump in here, but I do want to highlight and recognize Ms. Hicks for her leadership, because she has done some tremendous things since coming on board, and we are recognized across the state for many of the things we're doing with the DBQs, with the History Alive, with the performance-based assessments. I would just say that my limited involvement in this is to really get the state and some of our legislators to kind of move along with some of the practices that we have. And I think we have a very good prototype here with our social studies to kind of translate that over to some of the other curriculum areas. So thank you, Kathy. I think you're not giving yourself enough credit for the work that you've done.
Thanks.
You've done, but also your team has done.
Yeah, really has been. And teachers. I mean, I just have some really great teachers that just are not only collaborators, but also sharers. We share so much across, and that's just a great practice. So you don't reinvent the wheel.
There's not much more left for me to say other than
on the middle specifically, the fact that we're focusing on
right. And so that middle school piece, I think a lot of what Dr. Murphy just said is true, that what's happening in social studies with things like the DBQ project, where students are debating and they're using primary sources, where we're using performance tasks, where we had the 6th and 7th grade teachers use open educational resources to build out some of our curriculum documents and things, are the kinds of things that if we begin weaving that and seeing that in all content areas, will address some of the pieces that we've talked about with rigor in middle school. So the kind of equivalent to a DBQ when we look at science and math might be more problem and project-based learning with performance tasks that accompany that. So as we are working to update our curriculum documents and things this summer, we're going to be doing social studies, we're doing math, we worked on ELA last year. We'll be adding a lot of the components that we've heard Ms. Hicks talk about to other content areas, which will further support the work in our middle school courses. So I think it's a great model to start replicating and building into other courses.
Okay, so just kind of interested in a pretty simple answer then to, as we think about the core courses, and we're talking about looking for ways to challenge middle schoolers, and often when parents advocate to us, they talk about English language arts. Might it be the case that this is really, I'm just asking, if you think this is maybe even the leader right now in how we're doing this, across those core courses? And I don't know, maybe that seems like I'm putting, it looks like this is moving along.
I think systematically, yes. I think we have examples of similar things happening in certain courses, in certain content areas across schools. And what we're really trying to do with our curriculum work and our professional learning framework is to make that more consistent and systematic across all courses, all content areas, and all schools. But yes, a lot of the key components of what you saw tonight is what we would want to see in all of our courses.
And just add on to that, the DBQ project is also language arts too. So we have
Yes,
lots of language
integrated
arts.
learning,
We haven't done,
yes.
That is something that, is for further conversation, but certainly looking at social studies novels and working with language arts and doing that. We also want to look, in addition to social studies, is how can we integrate with other disciplines.
That's great. Excellent. And speaking of engagement, one other topic, which is field trips. So this is something, and I know, again, in elementary especially, we've got kids who go to Mount Vernon, they go to Jamestown, they do wonderful things, but what we hear is not every student in every school gets those same opportunities, and part of that is because PTAs often do some of the funding. Can we find a way to have a consistent standard across APS so that all students are getting to one of our amazing historic sites? I mean, speaking of knowing Virginia history, what do we need to do to make it happen to ensure that every student is hitting one of these important sites when they're an APS student?
Well, I see Dr. Natras allowing me to take that answer, and there's really two decisions that we have here that we can make. One, the school board can mandate that. Two, we can continue to leave that to the discretion of our instructional leaders, which are our principals. And I feel that responsibility ultimately lies in their lap and in their hands because they are instructional leaders. But if the board feels strongly enough about it and would like to mandate that, that's a choice. The principals have the resources and they elect to use those resources how they best see fit based on their school and their population and based on the needs. I'll just highlight, though, for you, it's very interesting with the fourth grade scores that Mr. Goldstein pointed out. I'm sure that as a result of that, they are having some hands-on experiences where they are, traveling to those different sites. And I think that's probably another addition or adds to why we're having such good success there.
And we also, the Jamestown, not every student gets to Jamestown, but Jamestown comes to us. So we have docents that show up in our classrooms and teachers sign up for them and they bring in the artifacts and they have the experience in the classroom. I know it's not like going there, but we are doing that. We have a Native American or American Indian artifact trunk that circulates Chinese. So we're trying to bring experiences into the classroom too.
So as we talk about this, and if the board does want to talk about it, I do think that we're not generally interested in mandating things that we decide without professional advice. So this would certainly be something that going forward, I know I'd be interested in hearing more about what you all think in terms of whether this is something we should be doing as part of our elementary or whatever education. So continue to talk about that. Awesome. Ms. Talento, go ahead.
I think I just wanted to ask a follow-up question on that, just for clarification. So it is, I guess I was under the impression that all of our fourth grade students went to Williamsburg or Jamestown or Yorktown for the day, at the very least. Is that not the case? You know how all of our students in elementary school go to the outdoor lab? I thought that the Williamsburg, Yorktown, or Jamestown trip, one of the three, was something that all of our fourth grade students went to depending on the school. So I want to understand if that is not the case, that only some students, depending on, because, and I say that understanding that field trips, there's some that are required, that like outdoor lab everyone does. I thought the Williamsburg one was like that as well, understanding that not all field trips are that way.
My specialist manages the docents, but I know in some cases we have teachers that opt to bring somebody in as opposed to taking students out. But there are other opportunities. For example, we have some students that choose the trip to the Arlington House, which is very doable, and may choose something else. So I think they do try to get students out to activities in the community, but it may not be that particular one all the time.
Okay, thank you.
And we can maybe
Thank you,
ask for
Madam Chair.
follow-up
Thank you.
information too, if the board is interested in more details about who's doing what, we can put together a follow-up question if that's of interest. Any other questions or comments before we move on? Awesome. Mr. Goldstein, last word.
Just a quick one. I think this is an excellent area of inquiry for us, and it goes to that question that I know has been circulating between us and CCPTA and others about the use of PTA funds, acceptable use of PTA funds. And this is a classic example. So I'd be very interested in exploring this more.
Thank you.
Awesome.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. We'll see you in 2 years, I guess. Briefing report next year
right,
again.
that's right.
Probably
We'll see
before.
ya. Okay, that completes our monitoring items, and we are now at information. And we have 4 items of information tonight. The first is the transfer of funds from the Capital Reserve to the Reed, Stratford, and Wilson projects. Dr. Murphy.
Yes, I'm going to turn this over to Ms. Peterson, where she'll cover these items for us. I do want to make note that Ms. Peterson is going to be coming back on the next 2 items as well, dealing with the GMP for both Fleet and also Wilson.
Well, my item's not up there. No matter, I can still speak to it. This is actually a request to transfer funds from the Capital Reserve to the Stratford and Wilson projects, not the Reed project. The school board actually took care of transferring funds to the Reed project back in October of 2017. As outlined in your 2017-2026 CIP, the Stratford and Wilson projects had a portion of their funding that was to come from Capital Reserve, and we are requesting that those funds be transferred from the Capital Reserve to those projects at this time. It was $250,000 for the Stratford School and $7 million for the Wilson School. In addition, we do have a little bit of good news and that to start the year, and that is that our Wakefield project came in about $400,000 under budget. The bid came in under $400,000 under budget, so we are also recommending that $400,000, which and that budget for that project originally came from the Capital Reserve, so we're recommending that the $400,000 that we will not need for that project be transferred back to the reserve at the same time as the Stratford and Wilson School transfers. Any questions?
And I realized, Ms. Elliott, I have not been asking if we have speakers, but do we have any speakers? No speakers, and I assume we didn't at any of the previous topics, or someone would have let us know. Board colleagues, questions or comments? We're good. Thank Mr. Goldstein. Three zeros, or
Yes, the 3 zeros. $250,000 for Stratford and $7 million for the Wilson School.
yes, and this is on board docs for anyone watching
It is on
from
board
home
docs,
who
exactly.
would like to see.
You will be able to see the whole thing if you go on board docs.
Okay, I think we're ready for our next item. Good. You got your question answered?
We have is the GMP for Fleet Elementary. I'm going to turn to Mr. Bergen to cover this particular item, and then Ms. Peterson will review the finances with us.
Hi, good evening. Pleasure to be here tonight. I'm really quite delighted to present to you the final design and proposed construction contract for Alice West Fleet Elementary School. It's a big moment for the project, so on behalf of our staff, APS staff, our designer, VMDO, our build partner, Whiting Turner, and our construction manager advisor, MVP, I show you their work. Oh no, I'm not moving forward either. Next slide. Okay. Just as a refresher, this is the third time that you've seen the design for the project, twice in 2016. In April of 2017, the use permit was approved, and over the course of, since April, you've acted twice to award some early construction contracts. And that is leading us to the point tonight where we're talking about final design, simultaneous with the ongoing construction, and for the school to be open and ready to receive students in 2019. Just a very quick update on the construction progress. So we broke ground in the summer. We have a giant hole out there where a parking lot used to be next to the middle school. We are about maybe 60 to 70% complete in drilling the geothermal wells, and we're about ready to start construction. So everything is really progressing along very nicely at the site. As in summary, the space program has not changed since schematic design. The building remains at the same capacity, 752 students. The gross square footage changed a little bit, but it was very minor. A slide that compares the existing site plan, which would have been pre-groundbreaking, of course, with the overall final site design plan. There were a couple of tweaks in the final site plan design as a result of the use permit process and building permit and civil engineering plan development, but they were very minor in detail, so really imperceivable to most folks. We still have 2 levels of underground parking in the facility, and we have a 4-story elementary school. All the nature of the arrangement of the spaces have not changed since schematic design. So on the first floor, we have the gymnasium, the cafeteria. The admin is the blue area, sort of right there at the knuckle component. And then off to the upper left-hand screen is the pre-K and K classrooms. Moving up to the second and third floors, on the second floor we have the art rooms. We have the first grade in the library is a lighter green shade, sort of in the middle section of the building. On the right-hand side, we have the third floor plan, which includes the 3 music rooms and 2 grade levels of classroom. That is second and third. On the fourth floor, we have grades 4 and 5. And then the roof plan. So really nothing has changed as far as the interior components, the same number of spaces, same number of students, and roughly same square footage of the building. A couple of views of the exterior and interior of the buildings. Starting in the upper left-hand corner, this is if you were standing near 2nd Street, you have the existing middle school on your right-hand side, and the proposed elementary school toward the left-hand side. And what you're seeing is sort of the alley plaza that we're creating in between the two buildings. And then the main play area for the elementary school is in front of the elementary school on the left-hand side of the screen. On the upper right, it's an interior view of the gym. And then the bottom rendering is a view looking from South Old Glebe. So in the center of the building, you see the main entrance to the school. The gymnasium is on the first floor on the right-hand part of the image. And then the main, the building sort of steps up as you go away from the street up to 4 floors. So we covered the pretty pictures portion of it. Now we've got to cover the words, so please bear with me. This slide may look familiar to you. We've described the construction management process, or construction management at risk process to y'all before. It involves 2 different phases. So in June of 2016, we awarded a contract to Whiting Turner to do pre-construction services. So what that enabled us to do is they work side by side with the design team to review the drawings, provide input throughout the design process. And then the second phase, Phase 2 construction services, is why we're here tonight. We're ready to award the contract for the guaranteed maximum price to construct the building. Another unintentional dramatic pause. Next slide, please. So just a word to describe what the GMP is. It stands for Guaranteed Maximum Price. And like I mentioned, it's the result of a 1.5-year long effort of the contractor reviewing and actively participating in the design process. We've had the opportunity for them to solicit bids from subcontractors and negotiate with them actively. And then once the GMP is agreed, the CMR must build the project for that price, bearing any major unanticipated changes. So examples of those could be unforeseen site conditions, like unsuitable soils, contaminated soils, utilities running through the site that we didn't expect, anything to do with hazardous materials. And quite frankly, if we change our mind and decide to add another floor to the building. That would be a major unanticipated change. Next slide, please. Okay, I mentioned before that twice we've acted, or you have acted, and we've awarded early work construction for the project. The first was associated with excavation and geothermal well drilling. That was in June of last year. And then November of last year, we had a second early work package to do some of the garage work and the concrete and the utilities infrastructure associated with that. So the way these early work packages work is that they are subsumed into the guaranteed maximum price contract. So those values are incorporated into this final contract award, and everything becomes a single contract. Next slide, please. Okay, so as part of the GMP development, the construction manager at risk took completed construction drawings. They advertised it, solicited bids on each of the subcontractor trade package. An example of a trade package could be concrete, steel, mechanical, and so on. When we received our preliminary GMP in July of last year, it significantly exceeded the funding available. And since July, we have vigorously pursued a number of avenues to control the cost and bring that down. 3 of the examples are on the screen there. Selective rebidding, that means we either allowed more time or tried to get more competition and bidders on the documents. The construction market is currently extremely busy, and we had some great success in either extending the bid period or re-advertising certain aspects of the project. The second element is refining estimated owner costs, and those are our soft costs. At schematic design, we showed sort of an estimate of total soft costs for the project. And since then, we've been able to identify and refine and actually get proposals on most of that, much of the soft cost work. So we were able to tighten that number and be much more confident in that value. And then lastly, and probably most significantly, we pursued value engineering options and scope reductions to rein in the cost. Next slide, please. So when we're talking about value engineering, it's a process that we do on every project, regardless of whether the estimates come in on budget, at budget, or under budget. It's really a method to get APS the most value for the elements. And in this case, we had to sort of take value engineering to a more extreme level because of the nature of the overages that we experienced. So in this particular project, nearly 150 individual items were considered. And I think it's important to notice that nothing substantial within the project has been altered. We still have the same configuration classrooms. The capacity remains consistent. The number of parking spaces remains consistent. So largely the project has not been substantively changed. Now when we look at considering the value engineering options, there are many factors we have to consider, and a few of them are listed on the screen there. So we try to minimize the impact on teaching and learning, the impact on the instructional environment. That's a direct connection to our strategic plan goal number 4. We try to minimize the impact on the community improvements. We spend a lot of time discussing these projects out in the public arena. And so we try to be as faithful as possible to those original designs that we share with the public. We attempt to be, when we have to make modifications, to be intelligent about it in some situations where we could easily add something back in if we had at a later date or different funding opportunities. And lastly, but certainly not least, we have to make careful considerations that decisions we make today isn't sort of shifting a cost from initial cost to an operational cost. So we always keep very much mindful of that. So this is a slide that was shared with the BLPC group in December when we met to present the final design to that group. And it attempts to identify some of the notable changes that we've had to accept to bring the project within the funding approved by the school board. So some examples around the site were revisions to play surface materials. The existing Patrick Henry school community has a koi pond, so unfortunately that has become removed. But the items that you see on the screen with the asterisk means that we are installing the infrastructure so that it could be easily added in the future. The last example on the site would be to reduce the number of new trees. We had, our proposed design had exceeded the replacement values required by Arlington County. And so this reduction would still keep us above that replacement requirement, but it wouldn't be as many as we had originally proposed. Within the building, one of the most substantial is removing a 3-stop elevator near the main entry. And some of these are really tough for us, but that one's another one with the asterisk. So we're constructing the shaft, we're constructing all the electrical infrastructure required so that we would just need to purchase and install a cab at some point in the future. The operable partitions that we had designed in between the classrooms were an element that we had intended to provide much more flexibility to classrooms, team teaching or adjusting the sizes of the classroom. So what we're doing in those cases, we're still installing the reinforcement, the structure necessary to support those movable walls so that they could be added at some point, again, in the future. One of the most, I guess, visible one to the community is during schematic design, we talked about a wall that opened up between the stage and the courtyard space. So that's an element that has had a significant cost and so has subsequently been removed. And then a few of the other options are included there, including some revisions to different building materials. And many of these elements are in the value engineering exercise are imperceptible to community members and BLPC and the instructional members. It could be as simple as replacing a manufacturer or swapping out a material. But these are the ones that we felt would have the largest impact. And now Ms. Peterson to talk about the numbers.
Thank you, Ben. The first slide talks about the proposed project budget, and at schematic design, it was estimated that the GMP would be $46,350,000, and the owner soft costs would total $12,650,000 for an overall total of $59 million. At this point, in final design, we show that the GMP will be $46,750,000, and the owner soft costs will be $12,250,000, which gives you a grand total of $59 million. So the project budget is right in line with where it was intended to be. Is this still not? Hey, it's working. The funding for this project is proposed as follows, and you will see that there is absolutely no change between schematic design and the proposed funding that we are recommending this evening. And that is major construction bonds of $40.3 million, operating funds of $800,000, and joint funding to come from both APS and Arlington County of $17.9 million for a total of $59 million overall. On the next slide, we talk about the joint fund, the $17.9 million that's being split equally between APS and the county. We have the parking deck, site costs, the accessible restrooms at the play area, some utility improvements and undergrounding, the emergency responder network, Connect Arlington, repaving of South Old Glebe, and some other transportation improvements that total $17.9 million.
Okay, so to wrap up, our staff recommendation is to approve the final design approve the project budget, funding available in the joint fund items as described in the presentation, and to award the Phase 2 construction phase services contract, which is the GMP, to Whiting Turner in the amount of $46,750,000. Thank you.
Terrific, thank you very much. Ms. Elliott, do we have speakers?
So we have one speaker on this, Michael Beer.
Good evening. I want to say thank you for wonderful design and school. I rise in support of this. I hope you'll support it. I have one slight concern, which is that I thought we set a wonderful precedent at Discovery in having a slide, and I'm just real concerned. I didn't see a slide in this, and I was, particularly with a 4-story building, I was hoping we would get a 4-story slide. But if there's a slide in there, that's cool, because I thought that was... In any case, I rise here tonight also to reflect upon Fleet School as well as Wilson, and I rise in support of that as well. I just want to remind everybody that we're spending quite a bit of probably more money than we might have if we had acted more quickly and more decisively. I know there were concerns in the community to have more discussion that delayed us a year, and the South Arlington Working Group did come up with some helpful things, but it didn't really change anything in terms of the design of the school. And we've waited a year, and with escalated construction costs, we're getting less for our money. And I know that wasn't just this board that delayed, but it was also county board. But as a community, when we delay on these things, we're going to pay millions more dollars. With regards to the Wilson School, staff came forward with a 2018 proposal to have a lot more seats for about $127 million. We are not getting our money's worth because you've underbuilt and because you've delayed as a school board. So we are millions and millions of dollars behind, and as you know, we don't have a lot of money. So please be decisive and don't delay when possible. Thank you.
Okay, great. Board colleagues, questions or comments? Let's start over. Do you have questions on this side? Let's go this way. Okay, Mr. Goldstein.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for the presentation. So I have a bunch of questions. I think I can run through most of them pretty quickly because I did kind of send them in advance, and I got some of the answers. I just want to, kind of walk through them really quickly. You had referenced that there were about 150 items that you examined during the value engineering process. And in the next presentation, the one on Wilson, there is the one that we got last month had a couple of slides on what those were in different tiers or different value engineering phases or something like that. I'm wondering if you can put that into this presentation, and put it back up online so that people can see the kinds of things that were considered and decided to be value engineered. That would be your question to you, Dr.
Yeah,
Murphy.
actually, Mr. Goldstein, we did receive your questions, I think, yesterday and then partially today. Staff has pulled some information together. We actually have that information. We'll be getting that to the board, and we'll go ahead and also post that information and kind of restate what Mr. Bergen has said in regarding to the value engineering and the process that we use.
Okay, thank you. And I know there are some of these slides and some of these concepts that are the same, this presentation and the next one. I'm going to ask this one now. I promise I won't ask it again in the next one. So this construction manager at risk concept means that once we agree on this price, that they're going to do, the construction manager at risk is going to do the job for that price, absent major unanticipated changes. And do we have a definition of major unanticipated changes?
Sure. So the succinct way to describe it is anything that could not be reasonably foreseen during the design process. So since the constructor has been paired with the design team, they've had the opportunity to review the documents, capture a far greater level of scope than a design build scenario. And so and secondly, there is a contingency within the GMP to account for sort of any unanticipated scope gaps and things of that nature. So an example of something that wouldn't qualify would be, as I described during the presentation, unforeseen conditions on the site. So if we started digging and found a Volkswagen Beetle or something, that would be something that would count as an unforeseen condition. Fortunately for this project, we've removed all the dirt that we're going to remove, and we had actually very little experience with those conditions at the site. But that would be an example, anything to do with hazardous materials or contaminated soils. If there are undocumented or utilities running throughout the site or any conditions that are covered up, those sort of things, we wouldn't expect them to have predicted during the design process.
And any changes we make.
Yes, and if we, APS, change our mind, that doesn't count either. So it has to be originally within the scope of the project. So the cost is based on the completed construction document. So if we change the drawings, then there are opportunities for cost changes there.
Okay, thank you. And so we've established the Plan GMP is actually at the cost ceiling established in the current CIP's 59 million.
The GMP is not 59 million, but the overall budget is 59 million, and that is within the CIP adopted.
Okay, thank you.
Number.
And there weren't, my understanding is the county was not involved in this, even though they've got a piece of this through the joint fund, because there was nothing in the value engineered items that related to the county's involvement.
That's correct.
Was the BLPC involved in the value engineering process?
So the value engineering process is largely an internal effort among APS departments. So there are APS staff members represented on the BLPC. You know, the principal, Annie Turner, is one of those. You know, we consulted her and other instructional staff when we thought decisions might impact the instructional environment. So in that case, they were, but in general, the BLPC does not, since it's APS's staff, our responsibility to control the budget, generally the BLPC is not involved unless there's a substantive change to the scope of the project.
Right, and I agree that it's the APS staff's job to manage the budget or bring the project in, you know, at the budget established, but we asked the BLPC to be involved because we want community involvement, because it's their school, it's their edifice, they're going to have to live with for, you know, a long time. And we asked them to conceive and to dream and to imagine and to, you know, discuss and add things on. And I would like to see us move to a process where they are involved from soup to nuts. You know, right from the beginning, which we do have them in the beginning, but also through the reality portion of the project where you have to adjust the design based on limited costs in order to make it happen. And I think they need to be involved in that also. It is your responsibility, yes, but we can, I think, take advantage of their expertise and their extra eyes and brains and desires. So I guess urging Dr. Murphy to think about how we would change a charge in the future to the BLPC.
I think actually we're at a good you know, sort of pivot point here, because as you know, with these future projects that are coming forward, READ as an example, staff is going to have to bring together 3 tiers. In other words, with on budget, or below budget, or a significant reduction. So I think this kind of tees us up be able to have that input from the BLPC. But I think one of the things we're going to continue to have to address and struggle with, and I hear it pretty regularly, is that we do have limited resources, but the needs and demands that we have, and how do we balance that out? So I think staff has done actually a very nice job in some of the value engineering that they've found. They've put in place, the structures, so later on if we want to come back. And many of the value engineering with this particular project really has to do with what I'll say, our finishes, changes to floorings, changes to tiles, changes to those types of things that I really want to recognize Mr. Bergen and his team for bringing this project in at where it sits today.
Okay, thank you. I just have two kind of detailed questions on the some of the items, a couple of the items that you talked about that were removed during the value engineering process. And one is the elevator. And so I understand the shaft will be there, but no elevator. And that, do you have a plan for or an idea for how or when an elevator would be added in the future? Put it in a future bond, MCMM, anything.
I'll start. I think it's good to mention that we do. The original design actually had 2 elevators in the garage, so we're still maintaining a single elevator in the garage. So I wanted to make sure that we had that distinction, and I think Ms. Peterson can address the other part.
The project budget has a number of contingencies that we will use when we have to. But if we don't have to, at the end of the project, as the project nears completion, we have the opportunity to go back and revisit some of these items that we've taken out, should we have remaining funds. And of course, this would be one of those items that we could put in towards the end of the project, should those funds be remaining. In addition, we also have our MCMM. We can also earmark a portion of those funds as a priority in a coming year for those funds.
Okay, thank you. I didn't know about the second elevator. So this is not going to affect the ability of students with disabilities to move between levels in the school?
No, sir. Not
Okay,
at all.
thank you. And my last question is about the sunshade. So you probably know that there's an effort at Discovery to add a sunshade, which is slowly moving through the county permitting process. And because it's their feeling that because of the way their playground faces the sun, sunshade would be a beneficial thing. Did you take any experience from the Discovery situation when you considered the sunshade and cutting it in the value engineering process?
So this sunshade is a little different.
Say that 3 times.
Yeah, I know. Tell me about it. So this particular element is a feature that was designed to restrict sunlight from entering the classroom. So it was an element that was placed on an exterior window. For each of our projects, we're continually trying to do better than the last. So the design team had an incredibly ambitious goal that no direct sunlight would enter the classroom at any point, at any time of the year. It was an extremely ambitious goal. And so what we decided to do is selectively accept some direct sunlight into the classroom for the sake of cost control. So that's what we mean by sunshade.
Okay, but in the Discovery case, they're talking about covering a portion of the playground outside. Are we moving into a situation where we're going to have the same issue at Fleet?
So at this particular project, we don't have any freestanding shade structures. We do have, if I can go back to the cover slide, we do have a large overhang right outside the gym that will provide a lot of protection. The shape and the orientation of the building itself will shade most of the pre-K and K areas during the playtime. So that was a factor in the orientation and design features of the building.
It was. Okay. All right. Thank you. Thank you.
Ms. Talento.
Thank you. So I did have a question about the sunshade, but just to follow up, if you do any mental health studying, you'll know that having sunlight is a direct benefit to improving mental health. So being in a classroom and having direct sunlight may actually help some of our students. So that's an interesting concept, just something to think about when, and we have the blinds that can alter that. But I was going to ask about that because of what Mr. Goldstein had said about the discovery piece and wondering if that was affecting something outside and understanding if that was going to affect outdoor learning. But this is really just on exterior windows to avoid direct sunlight coming into a classroom.
That's correct.
Okay, so that answers that. Thank you.
If I may,
let Mr. Chadwick respond.
I'd just like to say one thing about that, and it's actually, I completely agree with you on that, and there is a whole new sort of philosophy or theory emerging of anesthesia, which has to do with the fact that man grew up in a natural environment that was constantly changing, and the environments we create for our kids and for ourselves, we try to maintain balance and keep them the same, and that in fact we need to be making environments that are more changing, a little bit of sunlight, seeing the clouds go overhead. These are the things that actually keep human beings alert. So I'm actually opposed to the idea that we don't let any sunlight into classrooms.
Great. I think we agree on that.
Is that why we're freezing today inside the buildings, Mr. Chadwick? Sorry. Sorry.
Dr.
We just
Cannon,
can't recover from the...
Do what my mother would say, put on a sweater.
And I will say in my house, all my shades are open, even though it lets in a breeze, because I love the sunlight. So that'll be
Please
interesting.
continue,
But
Ms.
yes. Okay, so my questions are similar to Mr. Goldstein's. I understand our budget constraints, and I really appreciate the efforts that staff has made to reduce costs, because when you design something, every little detail matters. And so when you have to cut back, every little detail hurts. And with that understanding, our goal is to not affect instruction. So the questions I have are trying to understand, do they really not affect instruction? And if they do, then the school board, I think, should consider if we have options. So the fourth floor terrace access, again, I'm asking about it because of outdoor learning. It was put on the building. Can you talk to me a little bit more about why there was a terrace there, what they were going to use it for? Was it just, and is there no access now to the terrace, or is it like the elevator where we had 3 access and now we only have 1?
Do we want to, Mr. Chadwick, do you look like, oh, okay, I'm sorry, you look like you wanted to take that one. Mr. Bergen?
Thank you, Mr. Chadwick. So I'll answer your question indirectly.
Okay.
So there are a number of opportunities for outdoor learning on the facility. We do have a porch that's right outside the art rooms. We're calling it the art porch. We also have the reading porch that's right outside the library. So those are 2 opportunities where the students can, on the second floor, can engage with the outdoors and still be within the confines of the school facility. On the 4th floor, what we've done there is essentially we're designing the roof and the structure, the roofing system, the same way that we would if we were giving access. It's just a matter of the pavers, the material that would be used to get out onto the roof. And as Ms. Peterson mentioned, that could be an opportunity to be added back in toward the tail end of the project if we have contingency funds remaining.
So was additional opportunities for outdoor learning space, but we're not removing all opportunities. There are other places for outdoor learning space, and in the future, we would be able to, that could be an improvement that we do through other funds, as you mentioned.
Yes,
Okay,
ma'am.
great, thank you very much. And then my last question was on the classroom partition piece, again, in the same vein. What are we replacing the partitions with? I know we're gonna put the structure in so that we can have movable partitions, but are they going to be actual walls instead in these classrooms that are gonna be adjustable, and now will there just be 2 classrooms, and in the hopes that in the future, we would tear down that wall and put in a removable partition?
That's right. So the interim condition would be a simple drywall partition. So it'd be something that's easily to construct, it's easy to demolish, and still provides the proper acoustic separation between the spaces.
And the cost to construct and demolish is significantly less
Yes,
than
ma'am.
putting that partition in place. Okay, thank you very much. I appreciate that.
Ms. O'Grady.
I just wanted to say thank you so much for this project. I was fortunate to serve on the BLPC as an at-large member, and I thoroughly enjoyed the experience of helping to design one of the newest schools that Arlington will offer its students. I know that at certain times there were big challenges, how to construct the parking garage, several other concerns from both BLPC and PFRC members. When we took a look at the last meeting, which I attended in December, at the potential cuts, I appreciated you sharing those at that point in time. I just wanted to note that one representative from the community and a parent at the school was concerned about the koi pond, because I believe that that's something that the community, the school community feels is part of their instructional learning. So I would just ask that we keep them abreast of whether or not that might come to fruition if there are some contingency funds available. And just want to, again, just thank John Chadwick and his staff, the architects, and all of the people who served on the BLPC and the PFRC to help design Fleet. Thank you.
Thank you.
Excellent. So let's wrap up so we all know what's happening next. So first of all, this is coming to us for action in 2 weeks. Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
And so let me just check back on some of the things that happened. Mr. Goldstein had some questions about seeing, the list of value engineering and such, and I think you said you had it. Will it be posted for those, all 12 folks watching?
What we're
from
going to
home
do
who
with
wanna-
both the Fleet project and the Wilson project is Mr. Chadwick and his team have worked to pull that information together. We'll get that to the board, and then we'll also post, respective of each project, that information to board docs tomorrow with an explanation of what the value engineering is and what the process was to achieve the value engineering in both of those projects.
So folks who are watching and want to find out, it's board docs for this meeting, this presentation item. You'll just add that as a
Right, under that
an
particular
attachment.
heading, right.
Okay, all right, that's very helpful. Just in case, we want to sort of check our contingencies here. Suppose, as board members take a look at that and discuss and, look at the koi pond, for example, and say, this is something that's really important and we'd like to fund it beyond, just suppose, I'm hypothetical. Do we have to decide something like that within 2 weeks? How is this timing played out? Do you need details like that? If we're going to vote to approve this project, we're approving the funding, we're approving the final design, the nice pictures, we're approving the contract. If we have things like that that we want to talk about or think about, what's our timeline? And what do we have to decide when?
I guess everybody's looking at me, I'll start that one. So there's, I wouldn't say there's a great urgency within the next 2 weeks. So what we're asking to do is we're asking for pricing for some of the items that we really would like to be added back to the project that would be incorporated into the construction contract as an alternate. So it would reserve our right to add that scope to the project if the funds were available at a certain point.
And were those the ones with the asterisks?
Largely,
there?
yes.
Okay, so some of those that were on the list, and an example is the garage, the door that would open between the gym and the outdoors, that's cut in this design. Is there a chance for us to talk about that, for example, or are we just, is this it?
I think if the school board has preferences and priorities, it would certainly be, we would be welcome to hear those and receive those.
So everyone's walking softly here and I won't. I just need to, I sort of need to get us to a bottom line. And the bottom line is, number one, we need to keep these projects on timeline. So I'm going to encourage us to be able to move forward and make decisions here at the next board meeting, because we really have to maintain these projects online. By the way, that is why we are here tonight, because we needed you to hear this, digest it, and we need to continue to move down the road. I think staff has outlined some things that are appropriate. You know, the elevator shaft as one, we provisioned for that. That could be something that we could revisit. I'm very cautious and aware that construction prices continue to escalate. Now, granted, that's the GMP process, so we've got somewhat of an insulator there, but I do want to make sure, and we've been proving this out with a number of our projects, and Ms. Peterson actually pointed that out in the earlier item, that we've been bringing these projects in under the budget, so we have that flexibility. I'd rather wait for us to consider some of that flexibility a little bit later as we get down the road. If, though, in the next 2 weeks, the board has some dialogues and feels very strongly about something, let's go ahead and build that in. But again, I'd really like to encourage us to stay on timeline, because we've got a number of competing projects that are all moving on the same parallel tracks to get down the road. Mr. Chadwick, I'm going to turn to you. Is there anything else you need to add to what I've shared at this point?
No, but we absolutely have to have this GMP approved on January the 18th, or we will be incurring costs and delays.
Okay, and that's, I wanted to just clarify. We need to take action on the 18th,
Yes.
and I really just wanted to clarify, is, you know, how much wiggle room is there between now and then, and, you know, after that?
I would say
That's-
if you do want to consider these issues, you have more time to do so afterwards. There would be one of those change orders that we mentioned that would change the GMP. And then we would also need to do them by a certain time so that they didn't cost more.
Okay, excellent. Mr. Goldstein, you had a follow-up question?
Yeah, thank you. So, Dr. Murphy, you outlined we need to stay on cost and we need to stay on time. And I think we all want to do that. We all appreciate that, and we all know what the consequences will be, because we're all driving towards September of 19 opening, which then leaves a certain degree of freedom, which is physical changes. And so going back to what you said about what's possible or what's available, what kind of physical changes are available, or rather not available, for us to make decisions on in the next couple of weeks to stay on budget and on time?
And I guess I'd have to ask staff to go into a little bit of detail about that. I think Mr. Bergen, though, has outlined the ones that we could consider or revisit, and those were the ones that had the asterisks on them. I'm not sure. I know the garage door. Where is the garage door? Does the garage door have an asterisk on it?
May I interrupt here?
Mr. Chadwick, yes.
We do not need to make those decisions now. We should not make those decisions now. We need to move forward without making them. We can make them later if you want to, and we can also give you a timeline for when those decisions would have to be made by.
That's very helpful. That's very helpful. Everyone good with this one? Because we're just going to move on to another project and have the same conversation over again. All right? Ready? Okay. Dr. Murphy, our next item is the final design and construction contract award for full GMP for the new school at Wilson.
All right, and thank you, Mr. Bergen, for a very thorough presentation. And I'll turn now to Mr. Chambers, who's going to bring forward the Wilson project in conjunction with Ms. Peterson.
All right, good evening. It's been a long journey with the Wilson project, just as it has been with the Fleet project, and I think there have been a few other obstacles thrown in our way as we went with fire stations and use permit delays, et cetera, as we went through this process. But it's been, our team has been very helpful as we went along the way. Our design team with Leo Daly and Big, the CMR of Gilbane, and now we have the CMA on board, which is Heery. And we really appreciate the opportunity to present this evening. The project schedule, This is similar to what you've seen in the past. However, if you'll notice, our construction period is running right close to the first day of school. That's from some of the delays that we've had. We had a buffer of a few months before that that we had hoped to work through some of those things. We are actually working with the contractor to phase the completion as much as possible, because we have to do things like get technology into the building, et cetera. We can't just have the contractor turn the building over to us on September 29th and move in a week later. It's not going to work. So we're already having those conversations, but the schedule is working, and Gilbane has been extremely cooperative in working with us in trying to make this schedule work with the input that they've been providing us. And as you can see, that there is a lot of progress going on the site with the early packages that have been released. The excavation was done. We're pouring concrete. The elevator shaft that you see in the foreground with the bubble, the fisheye picture, and the crane is up on the site. So there's a lot of work going on if anybody has gone by the site. And it's pretty exciting to watch that happen. And just so you know, as many obstacles as we think the county has thrown in front of us, they're actually working with us on the elevator shaft, which we have a permit, or had a permit initially, to only go to grade with the elevator shaft and the surface. They're allowing us to take the elevator shaft the 7 stories because the contractor needs it to maintain the schedule, because it has to cure before they start mounting steel onto it as part of that process. So the county has been extremely helpful in that. As far as the overall building, the space program summary, the spaces that are being provided are the same spaces that we have been providing since the concept of the project. So all of the spaces are there. Everything is there that was in the initial project. Again, as I said, we've had obstacles thrown in our way. The phase 1 is as far as we're going with this contract, which will have a fire station, which is that white block on the upper left-hand corner adjacent to the buses. That will be there for a couple of years after the school opens. We have to go back to the county before we can do phase 2 to find out what the field can be and what we can put under the field, if anything. So that has not changed. None of that has changed. As far as the program and of the building, the floor plan has pretty much stayed the same. We have added some square footage, but it's mostly in that gray area, which is mechanical. They didn't have enough mechanical space. And we had to connect to the vault that's on the street. That'll be under the sidewalk, which we couldn't have a typical transformer because of the linear park on the side of the building, which you'll see on some of the project as we go. On this level is still as in the original concept, is the black box theater. The mechanical spaces, there's some classroom spaces down there that are affiliated. The next floor up, we have the Stratford office and the ground level entrance to the building, as well as the Stratford gym, which is the green area on the upper left below the blue office space. The green area in the middle, the larger space, is the gymnasium, the fitness space, and the red below that is the art room. And then to the right, the lavender color is the auditorium. These spaces are all what was provided. Some of them have moved in location from what you may have seen in earlier schematics, but everything is still within the space. The aquamarine or teal is the cafeteria on this floor. The blue in the upper right-hand corner will be the H.B. Woodlawn office. The lavender is the balcony for the theater, which is on the grade level. This is the Wilson Street level. And then stepping up, we had the library level with the classroom bar and the terrace, which will also be available to the community in evening hours and other times. Moving up again, we have the music, which is the lavender, as well as the terrace level and the classroom bar. Again, moving up again, another level, we have the classroom bar and the terrace level outside of that. And then finally, the top occupied level, which has a lot of the science spaces, and the outside terrace that is there. So the building itself, the feeling, if anybody remembers, a lot of these renderings are similar. The material before value engineering had changed a little bit on the exterior. They had a translucent masonry that was the white that actually glowed, but it was very expensive, it cost prohibitive, so it's actually just a glazed white terracotta at this point. But the building itself, the configuration, the view from Wilson Boulevard, the view from 18th Street is very similar. When you come in the door, lower left-hand corner, that's coming in from Wilson Boulevard. You'll see the learning steps on the left, and there's steps that go up to the library, which is above that green, and below the green is the gymnasium. And then you can see how you'll be able to see 3 levels of the building when you walk in the main door. So all of that has remained the same. To the right, you'll see around the corner from that green is the cafeteria on that same level. That's the serving line that you see with the wood above and below it. The cafeteria is extending to your left, and if you go out the back door, you'll be at the 7-Eleven if you didn't like what they had for lunch there. Just kidding. Construction management at risk, again, Mr. Bergen went through most of these. I'm not going to go through all of the repetition, but we had the pre-construction services where all of that team has worked together, and we had Gil Bain working with us and giving us estimates. And then we're looking at the construction services is what we're looking to go into at this time. On September 24th, the board did approve the contract award for the pre-construction services, and we're here tonight to be talking about moving into the guaranteed maximum price with Gil Bain. I don't think I need to define the GMP. If anybody has any questions, please ask. Once we just went through this slide. Early construction services, we had 2 on this project. On February 16th, the board approved package 1, which included the asbestos abatement and the removal of the original Wilson School on the site. And then on June 15th, we were back for the package, which included the curtain wall, so we could purchase the material, concrete, structural steel, and foundation, which is what's you see being constructed on site right now. And once those packages will actually be included into the GMP, so it becomes one price. GMP development, again, we are over budget at this point in time by several $1 million, and much of the overage is because of the escalation that we've talked about in the construction. Some of the unexpected increases in some material costs and subcontractors, as well as some of the other extraneous outside issues that push the timeline. And we have gone through and we've done multiple value engineering sessions through on this project. Selective rebidding was also done. Gil Bain actually went back and with best and finals with their low bidders and got even more dollars back. Refining the estimate, the owner's soft costs, again, we went through and spent a lot of dollars. Modified where some of those dollars where we made contracts on the soft costs. We also, on this particular one, actually have unsuitable soils, which Mr. Bergen had mentioned as unforeseen. There's a huge unforeseen on this site that we have found, but we know the dollars now, and it's included in what we're talking about. We did the value engineering and scope reductions. And I do want to say, I just went through our list of value engineering and scope reductions. The majority on this project are manufacturer changes, material changes, not using gypsum ceilings, using lay-in and grid-type ceilings, changing some of the lighting. But we really were not focused at all on changing spaces. The biggest change that we made was we took the catwalks out of the auditorium, but we have alternative ways to do the lighting. 70% of the ceiling was actually catwalks, which was way too much. So we modified some of those things. I think some of the things you have to look at in value engineering is the fact that the architect designers are trying to do the best job that they can do, and they're putting in systems and materials that they may be used to, that APS isn't. So part of value engineering is looking at what they put in and saying, is there a less expensive alternative that does exactly the same thing and gives us exactly what we need, has the same maintenance period, et cetera. So those are the things that we looked at as we went through all of these processes. We did look at over 150 items. Well, I think we're about 144 on this particular project, but it's nearly 150. But the quality of the teaching spaces, we didn't want to change that. We wanted to minimize the impact on the community improvements discussed through the BLPC. We did actually review all of the changes that we were looking at doing with the BLPC and got some of the input. And one of the comments that was made at the end of that process was, you know, I really don't want to make this building cheaper. I think we shouldn't cut things out. I said, well, you know, on this particular project, the majority of the items that we changed, I'm glad we changed, and I wouldn't put back in because I don't think it was the best value for APS. So I don't feel bad about where we are. We didn't get as far as, if we take anything else out, there's very little that we can look at because we've looked at probably every surface and material and system in this building, and we really don't have a whole lot of other space to make changes without changing the program. So we have not done that. So we want to minimize the impact on future maintenance and operations costs. And at this point, I'll turn over the button.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
So as happens in projects like this, we've encountered a number of items that caused an increase in costs beyond what we had anticipated, and that totals about $2.4 million. I'm going to highlight one or two of those. One, the unplanned redevelopment of 18th Street, where the county has agreed to pay 75% of that cost, but asked us to pay 25% of that cost. And the other is contaminated soils that were discovered during excavation that exceeded the amount that we had already anticipated that we might find in the ground. It exceeded that, so we've had to pay an additional $544,000 for that. In addition, because these projects take a number of months, even years, to come to completion, at schematic design, there was an estimate of what the cost escalation might be on this project based on the conditions in the market at that time. As we know, those conditions have changed, and now our escalation is approximately $2 million more than we had anticipated when we brought this at schematic design. At this point, the GMP is over the available funding by $2.62 million. This $2.6 million is a result of a number of factors. They are not additive. They're just the kinds of things that we've seen that have increased our costs. So the factors that I just mentioned 2 slides ago, about $2.4 million. The cost escalation that we're seeing that's higher than anticipated of $2 million. We've done value engineering of over $11 million, or over 11% of the total project cost, as Mr. Chambers said, without impacting teaching and learning. Any additional considerations right now will impact teaching and learning and could affect the approved use permit as well, which would cause delays. The staff recommendation at this time is to provide an additional $2.62 million from FY17 closeout that was recommended to be allocated to the capital reserve. So we would reduce the amount that's being provided to the capital reserve and put this funding directly into the Wilson project without doing the into the capital reserve and then back out to the Wilson project. It would be a direct transfer. In doing that, the $6.4 million that was going to be going into capital reserve would be reduced to $3.8 million. The proposed project funding is as follows. Major construction bonds of $85.9 million, operating funds of $1.97 million from the capital reserve, which was the first information item that you heard this evening, $2.62 million from FY17 closeout, and then if we reserve $5 million for the parking garage at a later date, we have a subtotal of $92.4 million. In addition, we have $8.29 million, from the joint fund, which is to be funded $3 million from APS and $5.29 million from the county. And then there's additional funding of almost $300,000 for select items related to the temporary fire station. The grand total of available funding based on the recommendation is $101 million. And I'm going to go a little bit out of order here. The joint fund items that I talked about in the previous slide, $8.29 million, are listed here. Community use of the terrace at $1.1 million. Utility undergrounding, again, accessible restrooms, responder network, streetscape improvements, 18th Street improvements that we're paying that 25% of. The costs associated with the temporary fire station that are being paid entirely by the county, and then building design to maximize open space. The total project budget is proposed at $101 million, with the proposed GMP being $81,481,364, and the owner soft costs being $19,518,636. I'll just take the recommendation. We're going to approve the final design as described in Exhibits A through I. The project funding is as described in Exhibits J through L, and award the Phase 2 construction phase services to Gilbane in the amount of the GMP of $81,481,363. $4. 64. Well, okay. And we are happy to take any questions at this time.
Okay, first, Ms. Elliott, do we have speakers? No speakers. We will, where did we start last time? This way? Ms. O'Grady, do you have any questions?
I do. I didn't think I would, but Mr. Chambers, you talked a little bit about the theater and getting rid of some of the catwalks, and it seems as though, as you described, that there were many catwalks, and maybe that we figured out other ways to use that space in what you described earlier. It just dawned on me that the young lady we had who spoke earlier today from HB Woodlawn talked about how important her experience was and how she had been in 10 different theater productions. And thinking back to Washington Lee, I know that at one point I think there was some infrastructure that was not put in the theater that prohibits the theater students from being able to do some things in the theater they may want to do. Are we going to be looking at any sorts of minimization of opportunities for students because you're minimizing some of the catwalks?
No, I actually think the opposite is true. Based on the firm that's working on actually going to be providing or building the system, we're using them as delegated design right now. They're actually designing and are going to build the systems. They actually say in a learning theater like this it's much better to not have catwalks and utilize other systems like drop bars and other things for the lighting and setting the lighting, because more students can be involved in that. The other thing that you don't have is you don't have the issues that go with students being on catwalks with cables tiebacks, so that, it's a safety issue as well and can become an issue. So you don't have that attractive nuisance that I want to be on, be out there and bungee jumping off of the catwalk into the theater. So actually the designer believes it's actually going to be a better learning opportunity for the students to utilize the systems they're looking at putting in at a lower cost.
Thank you so much.
Mr. Goldstein, do you have questions?
I do, thank you. Thank you. So we already talked about we had received a briefing in December that had a lot of detail on the value engineering kind of categories and what some of the representative things that were cut and the costs associated with them. We'll be seeing those in the updated.
Yes, we will be providing that list. Yes.
And then posted. All right, thank you. I already asked about the definition for major unanticipated changes, and so I promised I won't be asking that. And thank you I had submitted some questions ahead of time, so thank you for the clarification on how much we were able to recapture through selective rebidding and refining the best and final for the soft costs, et cetera. Can you elaborate a little bit on the 18th Street issue, that there were unanticipated costs related to development of 18th Street, and the county imposed that?
Well, essentially, we were initially working, I'll talk about the actual process. The process was is that they asked us to design, they needed to take the hump out of 18th Street. And initially, I think the county did not believe there were any utilities involved, nor did we. So when we did the initial estimate, there were no utilities involved. However, the stormwater went through the APA site, which is going to be developed, and they said the county needs to get the stormwater off of their site, which means it has to be in the street, so we had to include that, et cetera. So, and then the gas line for the temporary fire station had to be provided. We were eliminating the gas line out of the street. It has to be redone. So there were all these utilities. So the cost went up for 18th Street, and the county understood that, and they reviewed it, but when, they're essentially not paying for the entire thing, we're going to be paying a part of it, but the costs went up because there were no records of the utilities that we had to relocate.
So those changes that they said we now have to incur, the costs we have to incur, were related to our project or the APA project or the fact that 18th Street was there, or?
It's a combination of the both. I mean, we are using 18th Street for our bus loading area, so the hump would have been an impediment to loading and unloading buses safely. So it's partly ours, and it's partly theirs. So it's a street we're going to use, and it needs to be improved.
Okay, all right, thank you. And I think on slide 19, where are we on? Oh, can you go to 19, please? Yeah, that next one, that second bullet. Construction schedule delays, and I think, as we've heard earlier this evening, when a schedule gets delayed, costs don't freeze. Right. They keep on piling up. But what were the delays related to the use permit?
The simple thing is that basically we got delayed about 3 months because the county wanted to have all of the RAPS projects presented at the same time. So we basically had to wait 3 months to do our presentation. And the costs that you're seeing there is basically 3 months additional overhead for the CMR.
Good to know. Thank you. And so my understanding of, and thank you for the clarification about the costs, that they're not additive. I was confused about the 2.4 and the 2.0 and the 2.36. Where am I? So my understanding is that the recommended funding that you're recommending has gone up for a variety of reasons, and that there are still some items you considered in the value engineering process that you don't want to remove, or you don't want to eliminate, and some of them, or all of them, I'm not sure, are going to affect the use permit. And if the use permit is affected, I believe your belief is that it's going to affect the project timeline.
Correct.
And do we know that for sure? I mean, do we know that there's a hard and fast period of time that it takes them to turn a use permit around, use permit changes?
It would probably be at least 3 months to get through the use permit if it's not just an administrative change. Again, we would have to go and meet with them and talk about these changes, but we don't want to, if we're not going to go that direction, we don't want to, poke the cat, so to speak.
And we're close enough on that schedule timeline that a 3-month possible delay would be a fatal flaw.
Yeah, we would not be opening in the fall of 2019.
Okay. All right, and I just want to make that point again about the BLPC, that I'd like to see them, it's probably for a project in the future, involved and engaged, all the way through, because, anybody who's ever done a kitchen renovation project, anybody who's ever wanted the Cadillac version of something and the pocketbook doesn't, quite match that, has had to make has had to face that kind of reality and make changes, and these projects are no different. We want community involvement, but everybody's got to realize that it's not just as simple as piling things on in the beginning. So I think it would be useful for us to try and engage them in a particular, in whatever ways we can. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Ms. Talento?
Just 2 comments. As a follow-up on Mr. Goldstein's comment about engaging the BLPC, I agree that we should always engage our community whenever possible, but I do caution the one thing that as we move forward in that we don't pit our arts community against our athletics community, against our academia community. And a lot of times when you're a community member, you're an advocate. And so what you do is you advocate for what you're trying to serve the community that you represent, which I want and commend and encourage. But when we're talking about construction costs and it's about putting pavers or a basketball court material versus a catwalk, you know, we really need to look at what is going to affect the ability for our athletes to play and what's going to affect the ability for our actors to perform. And I don't know, unless we engage the whole community, how we do that when we have select appointed committee members to a BLPC. So I just caution that as we move towards that engagement in a situation like construction, we are thoughtful about that. And then my second comment is, if Virginia legislator does allow us to create our own calendar, we should not open schools in 2019 before Labor Day, correct? Would that not be helpful to you? I say it jokingly, but you know what? We would get very excited, and it might be an oversight that we forget, right? So
we don't want to do that till after 2019.
I just wanted to confirm, because it was in our legislative
Thank
package.
you for the reminder.
So,
Yes,
okay,
that's right.
just double checking, because it looks like we're running tight. Okay, great, that's it. Thought I'd
right.
end the night on a little bit of a funny
Excellent.
note. Okay.
Yes. So, yes, Mr. Chambers, I feel like we should keep talking until you give us another wonderful turn of phrase or idiom. It's one more for the evening would be really terrific. I do actually want to ask, so all the same things we just discussed in the previous presentation, I think there will be a list of value engineered items posted on board docs. We're voting in 2 weeks. Items that we may want to discuss, we can continue to discuss, and change of order, things like that, or change order. I do have one clarifying question. You knew where I was. Did you pull that up, or was that up there?
I did that previously.
You wanted to ask about this too? I guess I hadn't noticed it this way when we looked at this before. The county is actually putting more into the joint fund than we are.
They are, because they are taking on the full burden of number 7 on this chart, the costs associated with the temporary fire station. So their share is higher because of that.
That's nice of them. Could we go back for just a second to the overall numbers then? So the cost of the temporary fire station, that's a significant cost. What was it, 2.2 some million? And that is part of the cost of this project. So when we tell the community what our school is costing, we're including the county's fire station in our project funds. I mean, I know they're paying for it, but it's still kind of in our bottom line, and seems like that's not really part of our project, just because it's
Well-
going to be on our land.
Well, it actually is, because these are additional, this is not the whole fire station. These are the additional costs it's imposed on our project. Those costs are incurred by us, and the work will be performed by our contractor. So that's why it's had been be
This
added to our
is
project cost.
Things having to do with the fact that we can't do what we otherwise would do because
Yes,
of the temporary
we've-
fire station.
There've been
It's-
some changes to the stormwater, changes to the sequencing, less area for the general contractor to lay stuff out and store stuff on site.
Well, I think
maybe a
it's
few
also,
other things.
physically, it's the temporary ramp to get down to the ground level entrance, because we couldn't build the long ramp that was along Quinn Street, and the steps that go down there, and how the field is dealt
Right,
with.
and there's a temporary covered entrance from the bus drop-off to the building, because we can't drop off
Correct.
where they would be able to walk under cover, particularly the kids for the Stratford program.
maybe it's just it's 2 million here or there, but it put us over 100 at the bottom, whereas if, you know, I don't know, I see what you're saying. Those are things that are part of our project, you know, they're part of the process, but they're still not really, I don't know, I think you could argue that different ways, but it may not be.
They do have to be, we do have to award those to the contractor because they're actually going to perform the work.
I do see that, yes. Excellent point.
We
Okay.
could put an asterisk next to the total.
Just, let's do, like, I'd like that. I'd like that. Of course, we could also have an emoji of some kind,
There you
that, like, you know, firefighter or something. Follow up, we're still waiting for Mr. Chambers to come up with a colorful turn of phrase, so.
Let's go home.
Yeah, probably, Mr. Goldstein.
I'm sorry, I forgot to ask about the disposition of the original project funds, which were 100.8 million, right? And part of that included construction of the garage, which has been not approved for this phase. And what are we doing with that money that was originally planned to construct that garage?
We are reserving $5 million for that.
Sorry, where is that? Oh, where it says reserved parking garage funding. Oh,
Yes.
okay.
I think this is where Mr. Chambers tells us it's time to go home.
So we're not, we're going to hold that and not touch it? Okay, but I guess we're moving to the philosophical here. As time goes on, that money has less and less utility for us because the costs go up. And would it behoove us to invest that now in the funding necessary, the increased funding necessary to meet today's project costs?
That's one way to do it. It
But-
is an option.
Yeah, but we're not, that's not your recommendation?
It's not a recommendation at this time.
When would it be a recommendation? If you decided to make it a recommendation, what conditions would prompt that?
I'm looking to Mr. Chadwick for a little assistance on this
So
question.
there's a lot
but-
of clairvoyance going on here.
Yes.
Yeah.
I would think.
I'll jump in here. I think the board had previous discussion about this and elected at the time with schematic to revisit this with the parking and have further discussion. So I think until the board has had further discussion, I also think there's some other considerations that we need to take into account. I hear your point, and it's well taken about spending the dollars now. But on the other hand, I think we're just being cautious as far as what the next steps would be. Right now, we want to get the building open September 2019.
Right, we all do. We all do. And when we made that decision a year and a half ago, we weren't faced with the extra cost escalation that we are faced today. So kind of the situation's changed some. And I'm not necessarily advocating it, but I'd kind of like to have a discussion about it. If we hold that 5 million until phase 2 is not going to start for, 5 years, it might be almost worthless to us at that point in terms of building a garage, if indeed we get approval at that point. So maybe that's a discussion we need to have.
Still, it's going to come right back into our CIP, though, as debt capacity that we can still use. We can discuss this. I think now is maybe not the time.
And just to note that you will need funding to build the field and the covered entrance, even should you not need it for the parking garage.
A portion of the physical thing that's planned there will definitely need funding.
Correct.
Yeah, yeah, okay, thank you.
So, and a quick reminder, too, we happen to be taking action on our closeout on January 18th, Ms. Peterson, if I remember. So
Yes.
that transfer that you mentioned happens
Yes.
all on the
Yes,
same
we will
evening of
modify
action.
we will
Yes.
modify the final fiscal closeout and revise that before the 18th to show that the $2.62 million would be going to the Wilson project.
Would go, yes, Ms. Talento.
I just want to make one clarifying point because I know that many of our community members view our board meetings by topic. And so just to confirm the the $7 million from capital reserve, that is what was approved in our CIP. And I know you presented that earlier today, but if I were just interested in the Wilson project, I wouldn't have watched that portion of our meeting.
Correct.
So that
So
has
yes.
been pre-approved in our last CIP, and we're just now officially making the transfer over to the project so that funding can continue. And it was already allocated, already budgeted for.
100% A plus.
Thank you.
And by coincidence, coming to us for action on
And coming
January
for
18th.
action on January the
I forgot to
18th.
mention that when we did that in the
Yes.
first place. So everything.
I mentioned it.
Tune in on January 18th. Many action items. Okay, board colleagues, we are at our final information item, which I suspect we're going to see the same cast. It's on the crane swing agreement for Fleet Elementary. Dr. Murphy.
Yes, is this Mr. Chambers again?
Good evening. Good to see everybody. This is with regard to the Fleet Elementary School. We did the crane swings, if you recall, agreements at the Wilson project, and the crane is in place. And we basically, with the development of the school, requires temporary crane swing easement. And the agreements that we're utilizing were reviewed and approved by the APS Legal Counsel. There's approximately 6 or 7 properties to the north, which are individual properties, and then there's a condo community to the east or west. Always get that west. It's west. The other thing that we are doing, we're going through this process. We're doing the approvals. We're also still looking at, can we get a shorter crane on the top that won't swing over these properties and use a portable crane for the areas they can't reach. We're still looking at that option, but we need to keep moving because, again, it's about the issue with the schedule. So we would like to make the recommendation to authorize the chair to execute the temporary crane swing agreements as needed. Because it might be one property, it might be all the properties, or it might be none of the properties. But we want to maintain this because we need to keep the process rolling and get the crane up when they need it.
We are putting up cranes. This is not the first time we've had a crane swing agreement
Correct.
on this, to this board. Board colleagues, questions or comments? Mr. Goldstein.
Just for my edification, what's in a crane swing agreement? It's got to be some kind of indemnification, easement, I mean.
It's pretty much just indemnifying and if there is a problem, who's responsible and what the issues are. I mean, essentially, and what is allowed to happen. We cannot lift loads over occupied buildings. And in fact, for the condo community, the swing is currently only over the parking lot and the grass, but it is over a couple of the houses. But what happens in the storm, they basically have it as a free swing. It's like a weather vane. It'll swing whatever direction it needs to reduce the stresses and strains on the crane so it doesn't blow down like a New York crane does that is not able to move like that.
Okay, thank you. I did not. Thank you. When you say we can't swing loads over occupied buildings, the crane extends so far, but we're only going out a portion of that arm, and that's what you mean.
Right, there are limits
load.
already programmed into the crane that it cannot go over those, over occupied buildings.
Okay.
It will eliminate, as long as the technology works.
Okay, thank you.
Excellent. Thank you, Mr. Chambers. We have one item of new business, and that is to take action on a student appeal. Before I make a motion, Ms. Talento, I think you have a comment.
I will be recusing myself from consideration for this matter. Thank you.
Thank you. We're now ready to take action on this item. I move that in the matter of student appeal number 18-01, the school board deny the appeal and affirm the interim decision of the superintendent. Is there a second? Second. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion passes with a vote of 3-0. Board colleagues, is there any additional new business? And seeing none, we are adjourned.